Good evening. Thank you all for attending tonight's meeting of the Westerville City Schools Board of Education. The agenda will be displayed on the screens in the front of the room. You may also follow along by connecting to the district's website, www.wcsoh.org. Click on our district link, then the Board of Education, and then Board Docs agenda, and select tonight's meeting. There will be two opportunities to address the board this evening, the first being agenda item 6.01. The first set of public comments is relative to agenda item 7.01 through 11.03. Please state the agenda item you're referring to at the beginning of your comments. And then the second opportunity to address the board will be agenda item 12.01. There are sign-up sheets located in the back of the room if you'd like to sign up and speak tonight. Each speaker will have 5 minutes to address the board, and a timer will be shown on the screen. And with that, Ms. Hendricks, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Byrd.
Here.
Dr. Nestor Baker.
Here.
Mr. Velardo.
Here.
Ms. Davidson.
Here.
Ms. Cotter.
Here. At this time, if you'd all like to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And the first thing that we'll be doing on the agenda is item 3.01. Of course, those are our A-plus awards, and I'd like to recognize Mr. Velardo to talk about those.
Thank you, President Cotter. I am just really honored to represent the board to recognize those individuals that go just way above and beyond. If I may, I want to take 1 minute to share with you this description of the A-plus award. A-plus awards honors outstanding school employees whose actions demonstrate these values. The support of the district's mission statement, which is to prepare students to contribute to the competitive and changing world in which we live. Also, a willingness to go above and beyond normal expectations in support of students. And behavior that is consistent with the district's values, including respect, inclusiveness, community, communication, collaboration, innovation, nurturing, trust, and accountability. In just a moment, I'm going to go to the podium and bring up the individual that will then bring up the award winner. But we wanted you to have the concept of what these folks do within, and throughout our district. This is a very important award, and these people are extremely important to this board, to the administration, and I would suggest to the community at large. So I will go to the podium, the board, and Dr. Kellogg will stand up here, and we will introduce the award winners. Liz Washburn is also here to, I think you're going to sing, is that right tonight, Liz? Liz is the president of the Westerville Parent Council and is also up here to recognize these award winners, correct?
Yes, and the other members of the committee are yourself, Tracy Davidson, Linda Zowski, Laura Hendricks is on the committee, and Diane Paulson from the city was on the committee as well. So thank you to all of them for participating.
Great, thank you for reminding me of that. Thank you very much. The first presenter I would like to bring forward is Mr. Mike Hinsey. Thanks, sir.
Wow. Thank you, Dr. Kellogg, Board of Education. It's my pleasure tonight to introduce Kylie Bishop. Kylie is always ready, and thus Genoa Middle School is always ready. Kylie puts in the behind-the-scenes work that makes the school run, including pre-dawn substitute teaching assignments, and when they drop out at the last minute, she fixes that for us. event planning, budgeting, facilities coordination, morning greeter for staff, and nighttime ticket taker when no one else volunteers, and that does happen quite a bit. When something needs to be done, Kylie makes it happen, and she works tirelessly to make our school reliable, predictable, and always ready. And that's something that our students and their families need. Perhaps more important, Kylie puts people first. She welcomes our guest teachers every morning with a personalized name tag, often walking them to their classrooms. She remembers everyone's birthday, greets students and teachers by name, and begs to hold our staff's babies. Kylie understands that despite all of our efforts to create an efficiently operating system, school is a human endeavor. Kylie epitomizes our values. She is fully invested in the success of Genoa Middle School, often working dawn till dusk to make things run smoothly. She is always working to expand her knowledge, take on new responsibilities, but most important, she cares for everyone around her in the school. So thank you for helping me recognize Kylie as an A-plus person in life.
Congratulations, Kylie. The next presenter, Tyson Hilkert.
I'm here this evening on behalf of Elsie Hunt, who is unable to be present tonight, and I'll be reading her nomination. Dr. Kellogg, Board of Education. I'm happy to announce Ann Collins as Huber Ridge's A-plus award winner. Ann is an amazing person at Huber Ridge with an awesome and huge heart. She is always willing to go over and beyond for each of her students that goes through her line. Huber Ridge is lucky to have Ann, and I am honored to present her with the A-plus award. I'll elaborate a little bit in terms of some of the specifics that Ann brings to Huber Ridge. She clearly understands what it means that each child achieves educational success and understands her role each morning getting kids ready, that they have full bellies, that they have a warm and loving person that greets them as the first individual as they walk through the door each morning. Huber Ridge and our students are lucky to have Ann to be one of the first contacts of our kids each day. Continuing through the day, it doesn't matter if a kiddo arrives to school late and needs something a little bit extra to start their day right, or if it means we're going into the lunchroom and we need just a little bit of extra patience and a loving smile or hug to make sure each child has a full belly and is ready to learn for the afternoon. She understands what it means in terms of social emotional learning and how to work with our kiddos when there might be a challenging event that's occurring in front of them and how to progress them through the line, or when it's appropriate to say, hey, we got this and we can move on, or you know what, we need to get a little extra help, let me follow you through on this end of it. She's always inquisitive in terms of, you know, what can I do to help support this kiddo, or how can I help our various students that come through her lunch line, and truly understands, you know, what it means to bring a child through in 21st century learning. So thank you, Ann. We're very proud to have you on our team here at Huber Ridge. Thank you.
Ann Collins. The next presenter, Patrick Quinn.
Good evening. Thank you all for being here. I have the pleasure of introducing to all of you Connie Craigmile, and Connie has been a physical therapist in Westerville City Schools for 20 years. I've had the pleasure of working with her for portions of the last 9, intermittently, off and on. I've always found Connie to be an exceptional physical therapist and to be outstanding at her job. I'm quite sure that she and other teachers that she works with feel the same way about her. Because she travels between buildings, I think a lot of times, it's easy to kind of overlook her contribution, which is really unfortunate given its importance. So Connie works primarily with students that are temporarily or permanently disabled. Without her help, students on her caseload, many of them would not be able to participate in school to the extent that they do. Connie always puts their care, safety, and welfare first. To the best of my knowledge, her attention to detail is unparalleled in our district. And I'm sure, one of the things that I think is really important here is that this attention to detail has probably saved many a family from countless hours of, doctor's visits, increased medical bills, rehabilitation time, that sort of thing. In addition to that, Connie stays late to train and collaborate with staff. She works to create and maintain safe working environments for staff and students and make sure that all parties are confident and comfortable with things like, if we have to lift a student or transfer a student from, from a chair to a cot. In short, really, I can think of nobody that upholds the values described in our district mission statement more. So congratulations, Connie. Thank you for all you do.
Thank you, Connie. The next presenters, Mr. Tom Lanier and Ms. Jill Williams.
Good evening, President Cotter, Dr. Kellogg, members of the Board of Education, Ms. Washburn, representing the Parent Council. Thank you for being here. We really, just sitting here, really appreciate all the awards and the kind words being said about our educators. That really means a lot. It fills our tank at this kind of time of year as we're going through the school year. So appreciate hearing all the kind words, and very excited to share some information tonight about our honoree and our award winner. Central is pleased to present our A+ award to social studies teacher Mr. Kyle King. Mr. King works tirelessly to provide his students with challenging lessons and activities that are designed to make them think and to prepare them for life after high school. He's also the director, the advisor to our Black History Month program, which was kind of nice to see Ms. Candai is here as well. She's hiding, I'm sure. But as a parent, she helps Mr. King, and they put together a wonderful Black History Month program each and every single year. This year's program was especially powerful as it focused on the history of Westerville's very own Africa Road community and the role that it played in providing a place where escaped slaves and also freemen settled in central Ohio. In addition to his role in the Black History Month program, Mr. King also advises several student clubs after school, and those clubs generally allow kids to come together and discuss different topics and issues and really kind of have a place to come together and share common interests. Finally, Mr. King also mentors student teachers from local colleges and universities and provides them with a rich experience that prepares them well for their profession. Westerville Central thanks Mr. King and his dedication to not only his students, but to the school and the greater Westerville community. Now, Ms. Williams has some things to share.
So some of this Tom has already covered, but I wanted to add that we nominated Kyle specifically because he works very specifically for students that have been historically marginalized. And as Tom was saying, we're in the third year of Kyle's working alongside the very incredible Ms. Candai and Cynthia DeVise and the amazing talented students at Westerville Central High School to make the Black History Month celebration the best it's ever been. He has also taken on the Gay Straight Alliance, co-advising that with one of the central counselors and the Young Feminist Club. So all of this while he has just recently got accepted to OSU's doctoral program. So as a colleague and a partner, I am very, very proud of him. Congratulations.
got in. I'll take that for now. I'll take that.
Kyle King. The next presenter, Mr. Steve Massey.
Thank you. Members of the board, Dr. Kellogg, appreciate the time this evening. Our nominee is Mrs. Lori Lofton. Although her title of Executive Director of Human Resources and Employee Relations would lead one to believe that Lori Lofton's world is limited to the Human Resource Department. In reality, Lori's impact on the Westerville City Schools goes far beyond the Human Resource Department. She has had a positive influence in every department of our district, from special ed to curriculum and the treasurer's office. From the moment Lori was hired, Lori's influence around the district has been felt in a positive way. In the Westerville City Schools Framework for a Balanced Scorecard, it states, student learning is driven by recruiting, selecting, developing, and retaining effective and skilled staff members. Acknowledging that this is one of the most important things we do, Lori's approach to bringing on the very best has had a positive and direct impact in what is happening every day in our classrooms and with our students. Lori's work with improving the communication with the treasurer's office has contributed to a more collaborative approach that has allowed to us to be paperless in most aspects of the work environment. Having our ASOP system, which is the system that runs the district's attendance, working the way it has allowed us more streamlined approach to tracking time and attendance, which has freed up folks to focus on more critical work-related issues, thus being more efficient and effective. She is the go-to person in supporting and assisting both building level and central office administrators when it comes to SGMs, better known as student growth measures, SLOs, better known as student learning objectives, the staff evaluation system, ETPES, which is the electronic teacher and principal evaluation system, contract interpretation, and the district survey, my learning plan, and much, much more. Lori's transparent style has allowed for an open relationship with all bargaining unit presidents, allowing for a more collaborative approach to decision-making and dealing with labor management topics. Under Lori's guidance, the Human Resource Department is focused on a more customer service-related philosophy that has earned great feedback from the staff at large. I could go on about Lori's contributions that she has made in such a short time. She has been a boss when she needs to be. She's only yelled at me a couple times. A friend and a mentor. I'll close by saying that although she is leaving for that school system to the east of us, her influence will go on, as she has laid the groundwork for success and continuation of growth for our department and the district. She is truly worthy of the A+ award. Thank you.
Lori Lofton. The next presenter is Tanya Salisbury and Amanda Anderson.
We're here to present for Kathy Montero. Kathy enthusiastically works to make a positive impact on the lives of the students, their families, the teachers, and other staff members at Amherst Elementary. Her kindness reaches well outside of the doors of the school. She's an involved member of her church choir and dedicated to the Westerville community as well. She's committed to learning and growing in order to be the best teacher she can be. She is selfless in that she often uses her own money to purchase books for kids and pay off their lunch debts, which I think her husband's just finding out about that right now. Cat is out of the bag. She even has been known to take a student to important appointments that parents are unable to. She volunteers her time to read with kids who have nobody to read to them at home, and she volunteers with the Westerville Public Library program that visits the students of Amherst throughout the summer. She takes a personal interest in the kids she works with, even knitting scarves and hats for all 40 of her students during the holidays. She also plans a literacy night for our Amherst families each year.
Sorry. This year, she co-coordinated Start With Hello Week to help protect children from gun violence. Kathy cares deeply about the welfare of our students and works to supply them with the skills they need to be great citizens. Kathy's kindness and caring spills over into her personal relationships as well. She's taught her friends' children how to crochet. She has supported the Young Feminist Organization at Westerville North High School. She's an active member of her church, and she sings in the choir there. It's evident that Kathy Montero exemplifies all the district's core values. She cares deeply about her students and colleagues. She respects everyone she meets. She connects with our community in many ways. She's passionate about teaching and learning. Kathy's passionate spirit is evident in how much she cares about the people in her life and the empathy she shows for others. Kathy is humble and generous. She takes the time to notice others and appreciate what each individual has to offer. Thank you, Kathy.
Kathy Montero. The next presenter is Roshonda Elder.
Good evening. I humbly and respectfully recognize Vicki Moss as a 2018 Westerville A+ Award winner. Vicki Moss has consistently demonstrated excellent leadership in her role as principal at Mark Twain Elementary. Mrs. Moss has committed her life to serving students and families in the city of Westerville and has become an example of the type of leader that I, as her intern, desire to be. She consistently supports students and staff with her visibility and open door policy, allowing for the development of productive relationships and trust. In order to support transportation staff, Mrs. Moss has rode buses on numerous occasions to ensure student safety. Never one to miss out an opportunity to build rapport with families, she can be seen in Westerville neighborhoods making those connections. Mrs. Moss has told me, never ask someone to do something that you are not willing to do. A quote that perfectly defines the type of leader that she embodies. Mrs. Moss walks what she talks, and despite challenges, can be seen rising to the occasion each time. With a student population of over 560 students, she still has found time to dutifully train me to do this important work, and I appreciate her. The level of mentorship I have received transcends my ideal internship experience, as I have true examples of what it takes to build school culture and foster collaboration. I believe Vicki Moss is more than deserving of this award, not only for her tireless efforts, but for her participation in growing a new generation of highly effective leaders.
Vicki Moss. Next presenter, Dr. Victoria Hazlitt.
Good evening. Thank you to the Westerville City School Board and Dr. Kellogg for the opportunity to recognize Mrs. Beth O'Reilly. Mrs. O'Reilly teaches 3rd grade at Wilder Elementary School. She is an A+ educator in so many ways. She is Wilder's resident researcher, investigating innovative and timely responses to the challenges of designing a 21st century learning environment for her classroom and for our school. Her energy and enthusiasm for learning in children is contagious to her teammates and her colleagues. Every child deserves a teacher who advocates for her students with the power that Mrs. O'Reilly has, and every novice teacher deserves a mentor who is supportive, compassionate, and aspires to such an accomplished level in her practice. Mrs. O'Reilly is truly an inspiration to the Wilder School community.
Beth O'Reilly. The next presenter, Mr. Adam Rex.
Good evening, everyone, board members, Dr. Kellogg. It's my honor tonight to recognize Tammy Santa for the A+ award. And I had to bring her name tag up because I don't even actually know what her job title is off the top of my head. So technically, she's the Student Assistance Program Coordinator. And to me, she's a social worker. Super important to me personally, both as a mentor, a colleague, and a friend. She could receive this award for a multitude of reasons. She helps facilitate important work with both the secondary and primary school counselor team and their social emotional learning. She's a vocal advocate for students across the district and in the community. She's also a literal jack of all trades and has a hand in countless other important work throughout Westerville. When I wrote this nomination, Westerville had experienced a lot of tough times recently as a district, and in her role as a leader of our crisis team, we had spent a lot of time together. She's really calm under pressure. She's very great at communicating during those instances, both with our team members and in buildings. I don't know if everyone in here even knows Tammy, and if you have met her, it could have been on one of your building's worst days, which she comes in and does a fantastic job. I have a lot of really great examples of other things that she's done, but I was told I wasn't allowed to share all of them in this company. So if you like some really funny ones or maybe not appropriate for everyone, you can come see me after. I went to write this nomination, and I was sure I would find her name as a former winner of the award, and I didn't. And the fact that I didn't see her name on the list was surprising to me at first, but I realized that a lot of her work goes on in the periphery. Maybe not everyone sees the tremendous impact she has in the district. So it's my humble opinion that her quiet, unassuming demonstration of exemplary performance should be recognized, and I feel that she's a perfect example of what an A+ award winner in Westerville should look like.
Tammy Santa. I will let you know that the board took a real quick vote, and we've voted to have Adam come back up and share a few of those stories. Our next presenter, Michelle Giles.
I could spend a whole hour telling you about Noelle Spriestersbach and still only hit the tip of the iceberg of all I want to say about her, but I only have a minute. She is simply amazing. My son Jordan had a difficult transition to high school. She has formed an incredible relationship with him. She knows how to motivate him and get him to work on goals for his future. She nurtures his ideas and helps him to figure out what he has to do.
It has been a rocky road getting him through high school, but she has been there for him every step of the way. Not only has she been there for Jordan, Miss Noel has been there for me too. She has helped me help my son. My husband had a heart attack and open heart surgery last year. She was on maternity leave at the time, but made a special effort to touch base with Jordan because she knew he was upset. Noel has talked to me before school, after school, in the evenings and weekends, and during the summer when we are dealing with situations with Jordan. She goes completely above and beyond what is required of her. I am certain that Jordan is not the only student she does this for, but she always makes me feel that Jordan is her one and only focus. Jordan and I would have never made it through high school without her. She makes a difference in every life she touches. I know this because she's made a difference in Jordan's life and mine. I'm thankful to have been blessed with having Miss Noel in my son's life and mine. Congratulations, Noel, on your well-deserved A+ Award for Excellence.
Thank you, Noel. Again, I'm just here really representing the board. This is a very meaningful event and award for us to share with the community. And the final thing I would say, and it just came to me during this last presentation, speaking of Jordan and the support that Noel gave, what is the one thread? I challenge you to go back and read every presenter's words about the award winner. What is the one thread that goes through each and every one of them? They were reaching out to human lives and making a difference. It was not about technique. It was not about manipulating some system behind the scenes. It was about human beings making human connections and trying to make a difference in the lives of our students and staff. So on behalf of the board, on behalf of the administration, we want to give you one more hand and thank you for the work that you do, which I would suggest goes above and beyond and isn't recognized enough. So thank them one more time. I want to thank you all for attending. I know that almost all of you are going to stay for the board meeting. For those of you that, for those, yes, come up and get the box that your award would go in, and I think there'll be some pictures out in the lobby. We will begin the board meeting in just a minute, continue in just a moment.
Okay, thank you to all of our nominators and also our award winners. What an incredible bunch of people. Moving on in the agenda, item 4.01 is for the minutes for the regular meeting held on Monday, April 9th, 2018, and the executive session held on April 16th. We do not actually formally vote on our minutes, but are there any questions? No, hearing none, we will go ahead and move on to the next agenda item. Agenda item 5.01. I think that we have a presentation. Dr. Kellogg, are you up first?
President Cotter, members of the board, thank you for taking time tonight to continue our discussion on facilities. Last time we were together, 2 weeks ago, we dove headfirst into the recommendations that had come from our citizens group from the fall, that had had an opportunity for community conversation. We looked at some of the modifications to those original recommendations based on that community feedback. And then 2 weeks ago, you had the opportunity to look at that and ask some questions. Upon reflection, it appeared to all of us that we need more time to vet this out and go through it. So this evening, we're going to return to that original conversation and try and keep things moving along in terms of where we're going next with facilities. So most of this is just a repeat of what we did. These first couple of slides are kind of a redo, maybe help understand a little bit better and see a little bit better what were in the committee recommendations. So in these sets of slides, we've organized what were the original committee recommendations from December that came from the citizens group, that they had organized around priority 1, priority 2, and priority 3 projects. And what I've tried to highlight in each of the slides in red are places where there are points that need conversation or modifications to the recommendations that reflect community input from this last round of community input. The other visual is you see there's a checkbox next to renovation of Westerville South High School. That's because last time we met in the discussion about the facilities projects, the board passed a resolution, and there's the part 2 of that, or the second reading of that resolution is tonight regarding renovation of Westerville South High School. This evening, I'm also adding some numbers in here. I want to caution anybody who's watching this, everything is an estimate. The estimates can change because of more details of the project. Estimates can also change because of timing of projects. So a cost today would be impacted by changes in costs that would naturally happen if the project was 4 years out. So these numbers are not to lock onto and say that's the number. These numbers give us some idea of scope of the project. So the committee recommendations back from the fall, after that series of meetings under priority 1 projects, we talked about South, so I'm going to skip past that one. One of the other recommendations was add a new middle school at the southern part of the district. We're costing that project at today's dollars at somewhere around $19.5 million. The key piece to this one that needs consideration and understanding is that opening a new middle school does have operational costs, as we talked about last time we met. So those operational costs, and I'm, again, an estimate number on salaries only. This is not salary and benefits, which would be the biggest part of any operational cost would be salaries and benefits for employees that would have to be there. These are operational costs that, as we look at our current financial forecast, of course, we haven't plugged those numbers in. So in May, when we're looking at our forecast, we need to consider the fact that if this is a path we head down, there is an operational cost that are not in our current financial forecast that need to be accounted for. So I want to put that in there. The other one was school safety needs. And this is, the timing on this was interesting, and just a reminder that we did this community input component in February. We actually had closed out the thought exchange with the community just prior to some of the tragic school situations we saw, for example, in Parkland. I have a feeling, had the timing been different, some of the sentiment from the community in this area would have been even stronger. Not that it wasn't strong, it was clearly very strong towards make sure you maintain an eye on building security across the district, all school buildings, not just those that are part of the projects. So we want to keep that in mind as we go along as well. So that was a high priority. Don't have a dollar number next to that. I could be honest with you, depending on the scope of work, this thing could be $1 million, you could spend $50 million, and anything in between. It just depends on scope of work, which is something that we're working on. So those are priority 1 projects. South is in the hopper as we've entering towards the design phase. We have some cost estimates to that, so that one's moving along. The other 2 are still part of the consideration. Priority 2 projects from the committee recommendations and some subtle modifications that we mentioned last time. One was Whittier Elementary. Originally, Whittier was in the original recommendations from the committee as a renovation with expansion to increase capacity. Feedback through our community exchange indicated that there was strong sentiment that they liked the size of Whittier as it stands, and an expansion that would add capacity, meaning more students, wasn't favorable. The estimated capital cost on today's dollars for a renovation project at Whittier for current capacity is up there about $5.3 million. Hawthorne Elementary is still a project that would be renovation at about $5.6 million. There was community sentiment towards doing the project, not a lot of differences to it. Amherst was originally in the priority 3 group from the community group, but given the safety concerns and the educational environment and the amount of conversation that this particular item received during the community discussion, administration recommended bumping this up to priority 2, which pulls it out of when the funds allow and pushes it into funding earlier. The cost in that project, $6.8 million. That's a renovation, very similar to what we did at Point View. So it's not going to add seats, but it's going to add functionality. The cheapest project in the whole thing would be demo of Central College. As you know, we've had conversations with Head Start. We're working with them right now. So that one would move along. That's just the demo. We'd hold the land there. So the biggest change in that one was not making Whittier an expansion to more students and moving Amherst up from priority 3 to a priority 2. Some other priority 2 projects. This is when things get a little murkier. The Longfellow, one of the original committee recommendations, there were recommendations to Hanby and Emerson about exiting those buildings and moving the programs. The original recommendations from the citizens group did not call out where those programs would go. They felt that that would be something that we would work with the community. As we project forward, right now we would recommend that a renovation and expansion of Longfellow would be to a magnitude that it could house the Hanby Magnet program. The cost of that project, which would still retain the 4 classrooms for all-day kindergarten, is about $9.8 million. As we've talked about before, green space, land, et cetera, we can fit there pretty easily. The big question is a question of timing. In terms of if you're exiting Hanby, what is the future of that facility? What's the district's relationship to that facility? And do you account for that before you begin on the Longfellow project, or do you move and figure out the other parts later? So the question of timing in that. And remember now, we're talking about a 10-year program, so where we plug some of these projects in can be done in that scale. So it's not that everybody has to start tomorrow. Under Emerson, this is probably the biggest change in all the recommendations. The original recommendations from the community group was, of course, to exit Emerson and leave the building. based on feedback through the exchange, looking at the data from Triad and from OFCC in terms of the viability of those buildings, the recommendation now is to remain in Emerson with current programming as is. What that leaves open is the question about investing in that building in its current condition. The current 10-year estimates for capital improvements there runs about $2.5 to $3 million over the next 10 years. That doesn't account for any expansion for functionality. We know we deal with cafeteria, art rooms, restrooms. So what we would think might make sense for Emerson is remain there at this time and do some feasibility study for potential additional capital investment. What's the return on investment in that, and whether or not there's opportunity within that to have a reasonable change in the footprint to add functionality, whether or not that cost benefit would be worthwhile long term, given its the property it sits on, et cetera. Slightly different than Hanby, which has both the issues of landlocked with very little opportunity for expansion and classroom size. So that one lays in front of us as still an area to be discussed. Then is the recommendation on priority two projects for new elementary. Like a new middle school, has the same double whammy to your budgets. Capital costs, about $12.7 million in today's numbers. Our estimation and operational costs for just salaries, not salaries and benefits, is about $2 million. Again, like the middle school, we have not plugged in those numbers in any financial forecast, so we haven't accounted for that moving forward if that's the direction we want to go. So in both those cases, we have additional operating costs that need to be addressed and talked about. The last one was the priority 3 projects. These were also titled When Funds Allow. In the first case, all-day kindergarten, which got a lot of very positive feedback from the community, there's a couple pieces in this one. One is just classroom space. With our current fleet, with no additional buildings, there's limitations in terms of how many more classroom spaces we can squeeze out to make all-day kindergarten. That would be problematic, particularly if you don't add the new elementary school and you're not shifting kids around, so you have that problem. The other one is each additional classroom, of course, is a new teacher. It's a salary cost. There's probably some of that we can fit into current projections for staffing down the line that way in the forecast, but not the total package. Our estimates are probably somewhere between 15 and 17 additional classrooms and teachers, about $1.5 million in salaries, again, not in the current forecast. The other component that I didn't put up there that I apologize, I should have, is the other component of all-day kindergarten needs consideration is the fact that right now it's a tuition-based program on a sliding scale. The more we move towards full all-day kindergarten across the district begs the question of what do we do about the tuition piece? That's another operational cost that would have to be considered if you get to the point where you're full all-day kindergarten. District-wide furniture replacement got a lot of positive feedback, both in terms of staff chats we had and in the thought exchange component. That's a price tag that has, again, it's kind of like school safety. You could spend $1 million, you could spend $12 million. It's just a matter of magnitude and what we would want to do there. One that was not part of the original recommendations, and so I'll be transparent that administration thinks that this should be something to consider in a capital improvement plan. Within our roadmap, one of the areas that we've identified as an area of weakness for classrooms, and this goes to 21st century spaces, is we have real inconsistencies in the quality of the AV equipment in the classroom. So this would be projection devices, audio devices, screen technology, et cetera. Looking at funds to upgrade classroom AV equipment to more 21st century standards over a time period as well. And again, there's a figure in there. It can be less than that. It could probably be a little bit more than that, depending on what's available to us. Again, that comes from the Learning and Teaching Roadmap, was not a part of the original recommendations, but it does fit into that conversation about 21st century classroom space and what we like to do. The furniture component and the AV component adds a lot of value. So kind of to summarize, South's got that ball rolling. You have a couple other projects in there. I think the tweaks, minor with the Whittier tweak, not expansion, minor, Amherst moving up to a priority 2 on our recommendation. More difficult to negotiate is going to be the Emerson, Hamby, Longfellow combination, and timing of those projects is also going to be put together. And on any new buildings or kindergarten, you're staring at operational costs that have to be accounted for moving forward. And so any long-range 10-year plan can't simply plug in the projects, it's got to plug in the financing. And so that leads me to the portion that we buzzed through last time that maybe not got as much conversation as should have, but let's consider how you would frame a 10-year plan in both the capital, which is the fixed assets, big stuff, and operational, which is the daily running stuff of cost considerations. And as we know, and we've talked about, one way to fund the capital improvements, the actual facilities part, is through a COPS, a Certificate of Participation. We pay that loan down over time. We can negotiate the terms, the size. We use our available permanent improvement revenue, which means, of course, we're using permanent improvement revenue to pay a loan, and that's not money that's available every year for building improvement projects in our capital plan. So that balance point between how much of a COPS do we ask for and give up on permanent improvement revenue is a key number. But what we know is it's probably reasonable to assume, and my recommendation would be, and feel free to ask Ms. Hendricks on her recommendation as well, it does not appear to us that it makes sense to fund, you couldn't fund the scope of all these projects with just a COPS. There's a portion of this we can fund. The more of the projects we want to do, the more likely it is that we'll have to consider additional revenue sources from the community in the form of a bond issue or issues. Remember, we're talking about a 10-year time frame, so things can be parceled out over time in order to fund that over the 10 years. So that's capital budget considerations that we have available to us to look at how much of these projects do we want to fund and what's the timeline we want to do that with over 10 years. As we've talked about, a COPS issue is a pretty simple board action, pretty quick to get it done, about just really a couple of weeks before you have access to the money. Any kind of bond issue going out to the community is a longer time period we know about, right? So that's how we can fund the capital portion of this, the big stuff. So what do we need to know about our general fund considerations? Because now you're into that other piggy bank, so to speak. What we do know is without consideration towards new buildings or all-day kindergarten, those additional operating costs I just referred to, if you look at our current 5-year forecast, we are projecting, as we've talked about for a while, the need for an operating levy sometime in probably the fall of 20, outside chance of being able to wait till fall of 21 before, in order to maintain current programming, we would need additional revenue. That's when the difference between our expenditures and revenues get to a point that we're dipping too deeply into our fund balance. The longer we run in that deficit model, the more the fund balance we run out, and at a certain point, you've depleted your fund balance, and the deficit between your spending and your revenue is so big that the ask you have for the community is unreasonable. So that's a key target for us. And as I said, we know there's operating costs in Bullet 2. There's probably opportunity for small increases in all-day kindergarten if we have classroom space using current FTE projections we have in the forecast. We do have additional FTE teaching staff, I should use the term, not FTE, staff in there in the forecast now each year. But the total for all-day kindergarten would exceed what we have in there. So you have those two balances to look at. So how do you kind of piece that together? So how do you align revenue for facilities, the capital improvement side, with revenue you would need for operating? And here's one way to look at it. It's kind of stair-step approach. Again, over 10 years, this is not an everything at once. This is what do we want to do now, what would be done later, and what projects would be tied to that. So the simplest is, well, the simplest is you do nothing, which probably is not the best advice. The simplest is just to do a COPS issue. The magnitude of that is something we can talk about. Where's our kind of threshold collectively for how much do we want to invest in that kind of financing? We have people who can work with us. Ms. Hendricks has done some work on this. We can bring other people in for the board to talk to. We have some idea, some numbers, but probably needs more discussion. You can, of course, increase the magnitude of the project by associating a bond issue, which can be partnered with the COPS. We went through, we've talked to the community a lot about our ability to fund some of the project without going on the ballot. So this is that test point of how much can we fund with a COPS and how much would we want to fund if we wanted a bond issue. So you could partner those two components. They don't have to go hand in hand. There can be different years to this. It's just a matter of timing. And that would give you additional revenue for other projects other than for those projects that have no operating implications. So if you think about all the pieces that are in the puzzle, the pieces that would come off in this piece would be money for new middle, money for new elementary, money for all-day kindergarten, which have operating expenses. Any of the other projects, which are just capital investments and don't involve operating expenses, can fit into this model, and you can really address all of those other components. The last one is the most robust one, which, again, and you can parcel this out in any way you like, is the idea of a bond and an operating levy issue or issues. You have two different schools in there, actually three different components in there. So you could parcel out operating dollars for, let's say, new middle school first, later on to plan additional operating dollars for new elementary school as part of an offering to the community. Of course, the COPS issue, which I think is kind of one we're going to follow through on no matter what, to finance those recommended projects, including the new operating costs. And so, if you can imagine over a 10-year frame, depending on how much of the project you want to do and the timing of those components, you can lay all this out into a 10-year plan and see where it goes, all right? The promise that we had made to this point in our timeline was June is our targeted day for the board to actually be in a position to talk about what next steps they want to take after 2 rounds of community engagement. So where we really stand isn't, the question to the board isn't which of these do you want to do and fund right now. The question to the board is, as you see the projects and the recommendations and the modifications of those recommendations from the community engagement process, what do you want to move forward with now, if anything, with additional community input so you have some more information so you can make some decisions down the line about projects. So it really becomes this, is the idea of next phase of community engagement around what are the thoughts regarding support of these projects given their capital and operating and financial implications. Might represent the kind of large-scale question we're really staring at this point. Not to say that is the question, but to make the point that I think where we're really at is, okay, how do you feel about the recommendations and the modifications to those to date? And what is it, do we want to, are we ready and feel prepared enough as a board to turn around and turn this back to the community for more conversation? Or is there additional information that you all need before we do that? So I leave it open for questions and comments at this time.
Who's starting? Start?
I think you should.
I think I should. I have written down a number of things. Some of them are more thoughts than questions, but as I think about going back out for additional input from the community, I think the thought exchange approach was unusually helpful to us in giving us a broad range of individuals who participated and who shared their thoughts. What I don't want to do, though, is go with some things that feel a bit vague within the recommendations and the planning. So I'm wrestling tonight with what is most effective to put out for input that won't create unnecessary confusion, basically. And I'm going to the one that you all knew I would go to tonight anyway, which is the Hanby piece, which is, in my mind, highly vague in the way it's discussed. And I am a little worried about going out with something as vague about that, and then talking about funding things. So, you know, that's an example. So if there is appetite for working on the questions, you know, not tonight, working on the questions, getting input from us around what those questions might be, how those could be effectively shaped, then I am all for going out as soon as possible to get some additional input, especially before we get into the season when most people aren't paying as much attention to what we're talking about, just because of the way life goes in the springtime and the early summer. I'm also a little concerned, and I'm very much interested in the input from the community around this, on the size of the COPS and where we would go with that. I do think that the COPS is an important tool for us to have, and I think that we should be utilizing it. But what I don't want to do is, the analogy that always comes to mind for me is a credit card. I don't want to run up the credit card and then have nothing left for additional needs that we will have and do have in capital improvements. So I want us to be careful also when we go out for input in how we shape discussion and explanation of what the COPS is and what its pros and cons may be. You know, the operating piece, that is a huge issue, because when we talk about $3.5 million and we talk about $2 million, that's annualized. We have to talk about how that continues to accrue each year and will expand as time goes along. So we need to figure out how we want to talk about that as well. So in other words, there's a lot of really good stuff here, and there's a whole lot of stuff that I hope people are going to be supportive of and have good thoughts about. If I had my druthers, what I would do is I would move Amherst into a priority 1. And if I had my other druthers, I would be very clear about Hanby, and I would find an appropriate creative use for Hanby that maintains Hanby within the district fleet and utilizes Hanby as the educational center that it is and should be. And I think that we can do that creatively. But that's my druther, and I want to hear what the community has to say about that further than it has already said. I'd also like to see if, as we look at renovations, if it might be possible within those renovations to begin to do incremental steps toward additional ADK classrooms. When we renovate, when we get to the point where we can renovate Whittier, Hawthorne, Amherst, to consider whether it might be possible to include some small additional space in each of those buildings to deal not just with ADK, but with special ed, as we need additional spaces in those buildings. So we would not be increasing overall student population, except, you know, with ADK perhaps, but not really. I don't think we would that much. But to find an incremental stepping stone, if you will, toward additional ADK classrooms. And I also think that we should consider how we might look at our fleet a little differently as regards ADK. If we're looking differently at Hanby, if we're looking differently here, if we're looking differently at Longfellow, if we're looking differently at renovations, then we need to be looking differently at how we can deal with ADK. So those are some of the thoughts that I have, but I am most concerned this evening in how the questions and how the information is provided, so that we provide it in such a way that people are able to respond well and in a way that they find satisfying to the information that we have to share, because there's a lot of it and there are a lot of moving pieces within it. And see, I didn't go off on Hanby too much, and you guys probably all thought I would.
I didn't even think you would.
You didn't think I would? Oh, gotcha.
Okay, I kind of, a little bit.
Yeah, you thought I would, yeah. Yeah, I know you did.
Who's next?
I'm just going to be quick, just a couple of quick items. First is a little confused about the dynamic and the interplay, both from a costing standpoint and a location standpoint, of the modifications and renovations to Hawthorne and then the addition of an elementary in the southern end of the district. Because when I net that back, we're 22X million in doing a new elementary plus a Hawthorne renovation. So I think that's something that we need to take a look at from an attendance standpoint, and what that would look like. Because I definitely have my optics on the Hawthorne renovation relative to the students being serviced in the southern end of the district. Plus the numbers are really clear where we stand on the need for the middle school. But the additional elementary school, I'd like to get some more clarification on. Second is Longfellow. And John, this might be a takeaway, but do we perceive the need for Longfellow to continue to be a multi-classroom all-day kindergarten site if we go all-day kindergarten district-wide?
No.
Okay.
So to Dr. Nestor Baker's point about if we do something at Amherst or Whittier, whereas we may not be expanding it to a 600-student school, the idea of that renovation, including additional classroom space so that we can now take make another one or two more kindergarten classrooms so that those buildings could expand their all-day kindergarten. We can absorb back from Longfellow if we need to in order to keep it more at the home school.
Okay.
So it doesn't require.
Sure. And that kind of dovetails into my first question, which is that if we're changing the attendance mix relative to elementary schools and we add in capacity at Longfellow, then does that change our numbers and our perspective on projects relative to elementary schools? Right. I think that one's a takeaway because that's a projection conversation.
Right.
Emerson, just a thought, in fostering additional student and organization input into the district, looking at what the SHOP program at North did with the Cornicocosing project with Otterbein, could we basically promote our own internal brainstorming using resources that we have in the form of students as well as Otterbein to bring them into the fold? I think it's a way to respectfully recognize the historic importance of that building by having more than just the school district taking a look at it in terms of what we could do with it. So that's more of an observation. That's all I've got.
I'm going to follow up with what Nancy said, but I might be a little bit all over the place. So I see the historic piece and importance of Hanby here in the heart of Westerville. What I would like to see us look at is maybe taking or extending the offer to our Head Start program. After we get rid of Central College, maybe Head Start would be interested in Hanby. I do really like the idea of putting Longfellow closer up on the list and expanding it because I would like to expand magnet opportunities. I think that they're very beneficial to our school district. I think it helps us shine and stand out a little bit differently. So I'd be very interested in moving forward with that. Couple other things. Little concerned about new middle school in the southern end. I think it's a great idea. I am very supportive of it, but as far as operating costs, I think that's going to be a stretch for us, and I think we need to continue that conversation and figure out how that looks financially, and maybe we'll get to take a deeper look at that as we see the next 5-year forecast. I would love to see that happen. District-wide furniture upgrades, supportive of them, but I would like to see them happen as schools are renovated, not district all at one time. I, too, would like to see Amherst move up on the list. I think it should be a top priority. As far as Emerson, I would like us to just get ideas and get a little creative out there, looking at what could happen. We're talking about just making some improvements to art room and cafeteria, but are there other opportunities around? So,
You're referring to staying there, but looking at the facility and what else could be done to it, as opposed to what could be done with it if we exit it?
yes.
Okay.
And as far
Thank
as
you.
the land around it, yes. The cops, I think we need to revisit that again. I would like to see the amount we're looking at, and I think that's something we should look at a little bit sooner as we plan out this 10-year plan, just to kind of see financially what we can get done and where. We don't have anything in there about the OFCC, and I know that's not there yet, but maybe as we look at the 10-year plan, maybe we look at that for the new middle school or elementary school, which, again, do we still need to renovate Hawthorne then? I think those are all great questions. Could we get creative with the all-day K program? For example, could our half-day kids be in all-day K classrooms and we move services, like extra, like the gym, what am I looking there for? The support services? No, the extra activities they have. Could those be planned maybe in the afternoon for some schools? Because I know if the academics are earlier in the day or in the afternoon, you know, half-day could be split somehow within an all-day classroom,
Are you-
within all-day K.
So that the half-day students would be there? I'm not following, missing
So
something.
I'm picturing an all-day kindergarten classroom where kids could come, some of them could actually come a half-day. After talking with Barb Wallace, I hear that the need for half-day is not as great, but we still want to offer that opportunity. So maybe in a couple of our buildings, we could say, hey, you can come here half-day, and then at such and such time you leave. It could be morning, afternoon, we still could be flexible with that.
So within an all-day classroom, a student would have a half-day option to leave?
Mhm.
Yeah, there's lots of school districts that do that now. I think, and I may be wrong, I think I'm right. I think state law requires that if a parent doesn't want all-day, they can take half-day. I think I'm correct. So we would have to plan for that in programming anyway.
Sure.
If that's what you were talking, is that, okay.
Just an option out there, just to
Gotcha.
give a couple of options.
Yep.
And I think that's it, I think.
Well, I think we all could probably go on and on about a lot of the things that we think and ideas that we have.
Sure.
Not you. Okay.
Okay, just do that, what they said.
Oh, okay.
Just, okay?
Made my life easy.
Well, that's still a lot to chew on, it sounds like. Mr. LaRose, I'm going to ask something about South, so I'd like you to come to the podium and come up now, but I have questions about this at this point. Yeah, really several things that were said were I think spot on. I would like to have a deeper understanding of, well, this is really for you. I'm gonna blast away at Mr. LaRose in just a minute. That's what I do, right? Just a deeper understanding of COPS possibilities and how that could work for us. Gosh, I'm just really disappointed that you talked about operational costs. $6 million. That's just I added them all up. $6 million. And that's just salary, and it's, and it's not in there right now. So I'm just expressing, gosh, I'm just really disappointed and was more hopeful that we would be able to do something new for the folks who are in the southern end of the district, which is why I think the Hawthorne renovation is an important priority to me, not because it's adding, but because that building needs renovation. I'm looking at renovation in the sense of it may not add a lot of classroom space, but it can sure add a lot of creativity and innovation and inspiration to the students that are in a less than inspiring facility right now. That's why I like the idea of Hawthorne being renovated, regardless of what is built new down there, potentially. The other piece, I am firmly in the camp of Emerson remaining in our fleet and potentially being upgraded, renovated, if that is a possibility, depending on land around there, if that's a focus. I don't want us to lose sight of the security one. I don't want us to get caught behind the ball on the security one. Enough said about that. And a couple other pieces, I suppose, down here. I'd be interested in hearing more about the AV equipment disparity piece. Because I do think, does that, in that estimation, does that include additional Chromebooks, or is that a different kind of piece?
This is just upgrade of these kinds of projector systems and wall mounts and where we would go to next.
Okay, that's what I thought you meant. I wasn't sure. I think we just have some more work to do on this, and I'm wanting to move more quickly. I always want to move more quickly than probably should. But I think that there have been some good issues and thoughts raised here. And the last thing I mentioned, is it okay if let me address Mr. LaRose for just a minute on South? Mr. LaRose, I did not tell you I was going to ask you this question, but I really, you're fine with that.
Aren't you glad to know that?
Yeah, I'll tell you in a minute here.
You have built up a lot of credibility with me in your innovative designing and inspirational passion and your stick-to-itiveness in budget issues. And even when in our last pretty major renovation, there were struggles with contractors, et cetera, I felt that you, and I would say your team and the administration, stayed on top of that. And so I'm just going to ask you point blank, because I'd like this on the record. I have mostly, significantly large percentage of people saying to me about the South renovation, all in favor of it, move forward with it, let's do this. I was even very impressed with, I think it was Mr. Vibrantz's presentation at our last, and Greg, correct me if I'm wrong, not out loud, but correct me if I'm wrong behind the scenes, that people from representative of Central and North were highly in favor of the South renovation. Is that correct, Mr. Vibrantz? Thank you. To repeat, I get a lot of positive feedback about this renovation. Here's where the question is that I get from a couple people. You are not going to be, this is how it's framed, you are not going to be able to do anything with those skinny hallways. You are not going to be able to really fix the bathrooms and water. And you are not going to be able to do anything with the HVAC system. And so you've said to us already, but I'd like you to share, is safe, warm, and dry also in your plans for the beginning stages of this South renovation. Not just inspirational, innovative, creative, which it needs to be, but speak to those who may be listening about the HVAC, the water, the plumbing, the hallways, etc. Go.
Go, okay. Yes, we are going to improve the traffic flow in the hallways. We're looking at several options to do that, but it will be improved. Yes, we're going to replace the HVAC system. Yes to safe, warm, and dry. So the 35 to 37 million, going back to Triad's assessment over 10 years, there's 20 million in the 35 to 37 million that is dedicated for the things you're talking about, safe, warm, and dry. So there's roughly 15 to 17 million for that inspirational component that you referenced. So it's all in there, and I appreciate your comments with our prior work, but I truly believe that the best is yet to come.
Thank you. I will just repeat again that you have built up that credibility with me. I'm not speaking for the board, but you have with them too. Right?
Yes.
And I know that Mr. Bird served alongside of you for a while. I know that Mrs. Davidson served alongside of you and your team. We always want to respect the team. In facilities liaison for a while. And I'm sorry I'm taking this much time, but I want to repeat why I've supported a renovation instead of a replacement.
Can I address one other issue that I've heard about that you didn't mention?
Yes, absolutely.
And that was the size of some of the classrooms. So I referenced at the last meeting, we're expanding in the scope of work. We're projecting to expand about 50,000 square feet. And as we're looking at these smaller size classrooms and these academic wings, what we're looking at is converting a bank of 3 classrooms into 2 classrooms and then picking up those additional classrooms within that additional square footage. So in some comments I've heard, I heard that at our site council meeting last week with some of the teachers. That's also getting addressed. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No. Thank you. I say this and then really done. I just want to state for my own self that I believe in the renovation path based on the historical work that's been done, 1. 2, because I think we are trying to be as fiscally prudent and creative as we can. And 3, because I think that $20 million difference can make a big difference in some of the other parts of the district. And this is not just about South and South students and staff, who I happen to be quite close to. But I care about the other ones as well. And I'm just going to stick my neck out. The rest of the team can do what they want. But that's why I am going with renovation. And that's the last thing I should probably say about that.
Rick, if I can tag along real quick, Jeff, just simply because you're up there, because I've had this this hypothetical situation that's been kind of rolling around in my head for months as we've gone through this process, because we've all been going through this process and tons of work behind the scenes, and staff, administration, everybody. But something that's been kind of stuck in my head has been the first issue that we're challenged with is that we do not have the luxury of unlimited finances. We know this is the case. Not having the luxury of unlimited finances means that the board is obligated to be the elected body that makes the compromises. So while that may cause frustration in the community, the compromises have to be made. This is a $225 million school district with significant complexity. If we could do it all, and everybody would be satisfied and happy to pay the bill, we'd do it all. We know that that is not the case. So the challenge here relative to this hypothetical situation that I've had in my head has been related to the logistics of actually building a new South High School instead of renovating. The scenarios that we've talked about would be similar to what Reynoldsburg had done, which is using the back portion of the property to build the brand-new building, because we, again, don't have luxuries, and those luxuries include not being able to tear down the entire school and just postpone a bunch of high school kids, and their years for 1 or 2 years until we got it built. So once that building is built, just like in Reynoldsburg, we raise the building in front. So my question in this hypothetical is that in your mind, based upon your experience in the role, would the city of Westerville then have an outsized and substantial position on what we could or could not do with the property that now is a massive buffer between the new building and the sidewalk? Would they have an outsized voice on what we would be allowed to do with that property, yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. So my follow-on question to that, how long did it take us to get the Westerville South sign through?
Almost.
Almost through? How many years?
4 to 5. Yeah.
4 to 5.
Yeah.
So we have a massive component of property now that would be sitting there waiting for additional development, and it took us 4 to 5 years to get a sign, almost. So the logistics aren't, the logistics are a significant contributor to the realities of what we can and cannot do with the property as well. I do think, Rick, I totally agree with you. We have an obligation to be able to, or an obligation to be, to exercise wisdom in terms of the greatest overall impact to the greatest number of students in the entire district. And I agree with you, renovation is definitely the way to go, but I think it also, needs to be taken into account how incredibly difficult it would be for a massive new build on that property and the consequences that we could invoke. I don't think that the community would be happy if several acres sat empty and were green space and had flowers on them, and that's all that we could use them for because we're unable to navigate a path with our city colleagues for new parking or whatever else the case may be. So, thank you, Jeff, I appreciate it.
Sure.
Thank you, that's.
Rick, are you finished? Okay. I have a few comments. So I definitely agree with Nancy's comments about needing more time to develop more detailed questions. I do think that a number of the recommendations could use some more details. I also think it would be helpful in gathering feedback if we had multiple options along with pros and cons as we develop those questions. That's kind of a general thing. That's for the facility recommendations as well as for the financing recommendations. I'd like to see multiple options along with pros and cons for that. As far as Hanby goes, definitely a historic building in the district. I'm a little bit more attached to the magnet program than I am to the building. Sorry, Nancy.
No reason to diminish either.
Without diminishing Hanby, certainly not calling for it to be torn down or anything, I am interested in options for expansion of Longfellow and/or other elementary schools. We seem to have taken the direction that we will only be renovating elementary schools in the recommendations. And since I'm not sure when we would be able to do a new elementary, I would like us to reconsider options for expanding some of the elementary schools with pros and cons and include that in the next feedback round. I'd also like to see some options with the OSFC funding as a possibility where it makes sense. And,
While you're gathering that thought, can I jump in one more thing?
Sure, Rick.
It pertains to this.
Sure, it's okay.
I wrote a little word here to my colleague. I said, I just think we need a work session. We want to move forward. I think we're all moving forward with the one piece, but it's just still it's not confusing. We're just trying to figure things out, and just in board meetings from step to step, and that's just hard to do. So the only question I have, so what are we up against time-wise? What are we up against time-wise?
I would say there's two factors. One is more manageable than the other. So one factor would be, it's May. Let's just call it May, because that's next week, right?
Yeah.
And we know when the end comes, when the summer comes, community engagement becomes very difficult to manage. So, but that's manageable. If the board needs more information before they move from this step anywhere further, then I think it's okay to make that decision that we're going to take some more time before we go back out to the community, and what does that community engagement process look like next step. And I think from my perspective, I would rather tap the brakes and make sure we're on the same page and confident before we go out than to rush to go out and not be confident. So that's one. The second, though, would have to do with funding, and this is where it does get more difficult. That if you want to consider any kind of bond issue in the fall of 18, you are on a tight timeline for making some critical decisions about whether or not you would go on the ballot and which components of these projects would be included. So the secondary piece of that would be, depending on the conversation on the COPS and what the collective, right? So you see where I'm at?
Yes.
So
Yes.
what does it mean? Getting it right is more important than getting it fast, in my book, right? So sometimes my team will tell you, I say this a lot, go slow early to go fast later, right? So if we need to tap the brakes collectively, do a work session around financing options, we can bring individuals in. If we need to do a work session on some of these other questions, and as I hear the conversation, I don't hear a lot of differences of thought on the various projects. I think it's a matter of timing, particularly as it relates to Hanby. I think making room, I hear all-day kindergarten. I think there are ways to build that into what we've already got up there down the line. It's just a matter of getting the operating. And even new building projects where we would all like to be able to say today that can be at this point. What we know is within a 10-year plan, through discussion, we can look at where those opportunities might exist to talk to the community about coming on the ballot to support those components. When? I think that's the question. I can give you thoughts about it, and Laura can give you thoughts about it, but I think you all need to look at that map and plug that in. So I say two things. What do we want to go out to the community within these last few weeks? And what do you all as a board want to wrestle with first?
Okay, there were just a couple other items.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. That I would like to see included some more detail. Some of the options for security, just a little bit more detail about that. I know obviously it depends on how much money, but if there's some items we were looking at or considering, I think that would be helpful for feedback, as well as including any operating costs associated with new builds, not just the salary, but also the benefits. I think it's important to include that too as we gather feedback. So
rough percentage, right, Laura? 40% times whatever we have on the salaries.
what of our usual practices, yes.
Yeah.
Could you go forward, John, a few slides to the slide that says Facilities Master Plan Framework, a 10-year picture? It's the three main financing options.
This one here?
Yes, sir. Is there some agreement or that it would be good to have a work session to discuss this, or not?
No, I think it's a great idea, and I think underneath those things, with certain amounts, you could knock this off your list, or this could take care of everything in priority 2, priority 3, depending on how far we want to go.
And that depends on the size of the COPS, right? How big of a credit card do you want to take out that you pay that, right?
Yeah.
And that's what helps us determine the other pieces and the timing of the other pieces, bond, levy, et cetera. I just think that right here, I really would, and I know it's always hard for us to schedule. I get that. Is that?
Yeah, and when you jotted down work session, I was getting ready to write down special meeting to discuss the recommendations of financing. Because for me to make decisions on that, I have to have a much better sense of where we each feel about where those projects lie and which projects we truly want to move with and what incremental pieces we might determine within certain of those recommendations. Once we have some agreement amongst ourselves, because we haven't really had the chance to just hash it all out, because this is not conducive to doing that, and there's no other option for us to do that. If we can hash out these recommendations and hash out where we feel this should happen and that should happen and what we could do about the south end and what Hanby means and all of these pieces, then those pieces begin to fall into place a little more clearly. At this point in time, if you asked me if I were ready to vote on whether to go on the ballot in the fall, I would have to say I can't do that because I don't have any clue what the heck we want to go ahead with at this point in time other than south.
And there may be some people here who watch this. I know we know this, but there may be, we can't get together as a group and hash things out.
You won't find us an old bag of nails.
There are sunshine laws. There are laws that prevent us from let's just get together for a while and have lunch and just talk about this. We are not allowed to do that. I know most of you might know that, so just speaking it out loud. That's why we don't do that, because, you get in trouble when you do that. And it's just not ethical. So that's why, just in case people didn't know that.
Even though it means that we have to say we had intended to come back for additional input at this point in time, we're not ready. I would much rather do that because that's a far less important deadline than these other components that we're talking about, in my mind. And I know it will be really hard to find a time at this time of year. I am willing to wait until we find a time because I don't think we're ready.
So I think,
We need to see the
sorry, I want to cut anybody
five-year
off.
forecast, too. Tracy. We need to see the 5-year forecast, too. I mean, all these things are going to come into play. Yeah, they are. I mean, it's going to be like a big puzzle. I'm okay with waiting, too.
Yeah, me too. I think a work session's a good idea. Richard?
So in thinking about the work session, the first variable that kind of tips the scale and everything else goes is the COPS, right? So the magnitude of that, because whatever that number is and the projects it covers then determines what's left outside and has to be considered for additional funding. So would you like would you like a discussion on COPS prior to a work session? Would you like that as part of the work session, or would you like that as two different work
I don't
sessions?
see that we can parse them apart. And for me, even determining what, the COPS number looks like is inherently based on what we decide in those pieces, what all those individual pieces may be. So we can pluck this piece and that piece and the other piece and come up with a sum total for the COPS.
We do want to keep in mind this May piece for the fall. So, yeah, I mean, we do want
Work
to keep that
session
in
tomorrow
mind.
night, we're ready?
What?
Work session tomorrow.
We do want to keep that in mind, right? We want to keep that May deadline for a fall levy thing, at least in our mind, for when we try to get together.
Ms. Hendricks probably knows the timeline on the,
What's that?
Ms. Hendricks probably has a better idea on the timeline for if you are going to consider that issue.
Yeah, a little bit. We'll take 2 sessions, a couple of resolutions at each. The way the latest we can push it out is June 11th, and then June 9th. Filing deadlines are in July after that, June 9th. So
Unless
gotta
they-
have something on June 11th. And those on June 11th doesn't mean that you're going to. It's just getting you started, like, in case you wanted to. And
So we have a little time then. That's good.
And
Thank you,
that's-
Laura.
Those dates are based on current scheduled board meetings. There's nothing to say you can't schedule another meeting if you need to.
And that's not, yeah, that's also not taking into account that we know that the COPs themselves can fund a certain portion of the beginnings because it's a 10-year plan. And I think that's a point that's worth emphasizing here. I know, Rick, I appreciate you bringing up the point about this board is diligent about us not having conversations with each other outside of declared board sessions, which makes it necessary for us to go through these other sessions. Perfectly comfortable doing it, but if there's any doubt as to why we are so diligent first on that component of how we interact with each other, and second, why we're being so exhaustive about this, is we cannot take our eye off the ball that when we're talking about the next 10 years, we are talking about, inclusive of the money for these projects, over $2.5 billion of Westerville citizens' money. This is serious and this is significant, and if there's anybody that feels like we should be moving faster on spending $2.5 billion worth of Westerville citizens' money, I'm happy to have the conversation with them, because this is not something that we can nor will we take lightly.
We need a work session.
The only other component that runs into a time crunch then is community feedback down the line. And, I think we just got to consider that as we move down the line. Because if at the end of the day, you come out of the work session, good to go, pointing towards something you want to do in the fall, you have left in the wake opportunity for that community conversation. Now, it's not to say the timing of it gets awkward. That's the only way to say it. Because if you wait to the fall to return to the conversation, you've already made a commitment to what you're doing, or waiting on that commitment if you're seeking additional funds until the following fall, which is fine too, just back burner some of the projects out another year, which can be managed.
I'm sorry. And so that's a great reminder, and I would bet my fellow board members would concur, the community engagement piece. And so out of this work session, perhaps can come, okay, these are the pieces we need to take to the community because we still want their input on these pieces of it.
And that makes the timing of that work session
even tighter. Yes, yes, it does.
But I'm 24/7 to you.
Okay, I'm done, President Cotter.
We'll need a good facilitator, an efficient one. Any other comments? No. Okay, good.
So we leave, understand we're going to head towards a work session, and we'll try and do that as quickly as possible and play out some of the scenarios that we talked about. We'll work on that.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Kellogg. Moving down the agenda, item number 6.01, we do have speakers this evening. Just a reminder that you will have 5 minutes to address the board in the public comment section. Please remember to address the agenda item that you were referencing at the beginning of your comments. A timer will be shown on the screen, and Mr. Hershiser will call time when 5 minutes has elapsed. Please address your comments to the board and not to the audience. Tonight, our first speaker is Ms. Peg Duffy.
Hopefully I'll be able to make sense of my notes. Mrs. Cotter, sort of like you, I'm going around where I've changed things. First item, I have 3 different agenda items. 7.02, we just heard the outline of the projects. You need specifics before you are approving a resolution to allow us to access $94 million of money. Now, it seems to me from what you said, this is why I'm changing some of the things. I said detailed discussions on what constitutes the project, and thank you, you are asking for that. I do have a kind of a concern, part of that. Does the south estimate cover an addition or only renovation? An addition to the existing building. At the last meeting, one board member said, we need the money talk, and you seem to be saying that now. And as you've indicated, and I was going to say, I would think that would include more specifics to ponder. But don't forget all the steps in the decision-making process. Don't skip anything. And I think this came across tonight where you were saying at various points things were vague. So something seems to be lacking. 9.02, resolution to proceed with design options. Excuse me, I'm a bit confused because the report tonight said that you had passed the resolution, but there was an assumption of consensus at the last meeting. It was evident to the audience that there should have been a resolution at that time, and that it seems to be why you have the resolution tonight that says we discussed at an earlier meeting, tonight we are making it official, kind of an after-the-fact thing. 10.11, middle school attendance lines. The resolution refers to an attachment that was not available online, and yet the resolution's already available. Now, let's assume that this attachment gives the rationale for the heritage relief. If the board is ready to pass the resolution, I have to assume that board members had the information before it was made public. And here again, the steps in the process. We need all the steps in the process for transparency. If we skip some of the steps, then it gives the appearance of being something behind closed doors. Even though we know that you are diligent about not meeting, it's having the information and making the assumption that we have it. Why the immediacy? Couldn't it wait just one more meeting to let the sunshine in on this so that the people who would be affected would know about it?
Thank you, Ms. Duffy. Our next speaker is Mr. John Walden.
Good evening, members of the board, Dr. Kellogg, Interim Treasurer Hendricks. My name is John Walden, and I'm here to speak to you about, much like PEG, agenda items 5.01, 9.02, and 7.02. As an initial matter, I want to thank you for your continued efforts on behalf of the children of the district and of the community. And as many of you may be aware, I work for OFCC, which has been discussed often both tonight and prior meetings. So I appreciate, as a fellow member of a public organization, I appreciate that there's often a misunderstanding of the roles of a body and also what decisions are made. Tonight, obviously, I'm here solely as a parent and a community member, but many of my work experiences shape my views. In that capacity, I have almost a daily opportunity to see the results of other school facilities projects across the state and see what makes those successful versus versus those where I get the angry parents calling and complaining about things that happen on that project and how did they stop it. I also wanted to let you know, in full disclosure, I did comment liberally on the thought exchange as a parent, and I would, from my own perspective, did talk about considering the building South New versus renovating. But I understand and also appreciate greatly that this staff and the board are making recommendations and decisions from different perspectives, which I believe is okay as well. But I ask you, and actually urge you, to consider or take into consideration a few things. First, I urge you to take a step back from the facility condition assessments relied upon both by the organization I work for and this district that talk about the cost that we'll get to take the buildings and bring them up to date to just today's standards based on their current uses, which is what our assessments do at OFCC. And ask you to consider a full facilities master plan where you can consider how and in what environment that we want to educate our children over the next 25 and 50 years, which I think is consistent with most of the comments that you gave tonight and some of the questions that you had both for the staff, that are considering these projects. At least I ask you to do the best you can for the next 25 or 50 years, because we don't know the speed at which technology will make some of those decisions outdated faster than we think. But I use those numbers based on the numbers that we talked about for the average years of our buildings that we have currently. And you think about most of I think the average years are 50 years that you're talking about currently. And to think about, based on that historical data, that the decisions that you make as a board about our facilities will actually not impact my child, but most likely my child's grandchildren and where they're going to school based on those years. And I also ask you to take some time to think about stepping outside of our district to perhaps view even some of the 1,100 buildings that we've built at the commission and spent over $12 billion, probably the more recent ones, I'll admit, and see what they've done, whether it be on renovation or building new, or how they incorporate renovation additions in tight sites, and just to see some of their experiences and see what it was like to even work with us as a commission. And they might offer you, and you'll get some good, some bad. I'm realistic. And finally, I actually encourage you not to leave money on the table with respect to the commission. I know that working with the commission, I would say it doesn't make things exponentially more complicated, but we do have rules and we do have guidance because we have to, as a statewide based financial assistance program, that we try to do the best we can. I will say we're much less rigid than we were when this organization was founded, and I think we've had to learn ourselves, and we've tried to do that. But I would say that the fact that this district may get 25 or 30 cents on the dollar for what has got to be done is too much money to leave on the table if you can make it work. I would also, in my short time left, urge you to consider asking the commission to change its ELP-based criteria, which is a way for the district to get credit, because the amount of years and the amount of time that was discussed when the numbers were made are not consistent with available funding we have in light of the demand. I know it's being looked at, but if you consider that request to the commission, it could go a long way in helping the district earn credit on money that it spends before the commission can actually help participate. Again, I appreciate your time and I appreciate your considerations of these tough issues and challenges. And I look forward to working with you and beside you on any work sessions or anything you might need from me as a community member and parent. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Walden. Okay, moving on in the agenda, item number 7.01. Is there a motion to discuss item 7.01 in a second?
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Hendricks?
Good evening. Okay, we are approving the financials for March 2018, and I'll just give you some brief highlights. General fund year-to-date receipts are at $160,956,597 million. Year-to-date expenditures, $125,347,000. Our current unencumbered balance at the end of March was $124,737,000. All funds, year-to-date receipts, $207,159,000. Year-to-date expenditures, $167,548,000. And unencumbered fund balance for all funds, $147,863,000.
Thank you. Are there any questions from board members? Can you please call the roll?
Mr. Byrd?
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Yes.
Mr. Filardo?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Ms. Cotter?
Yes. Okay, moving on to item 7.02. Can I please have a motion in a second?
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Hendricks, can you please explain this resolution?
Yes, so before you is a resolution for the district to be able to be reimbursed for expenditures that there might come from the general fund or PI funds that we currently have if and when we proceed with the COPS and/or a bond. $94 million was just an estimate on some numbers that we had looked at, basically a $35 million COPS project and then a $55 million bond, which would be a 1 mil bond. Obviously, none of that's been decided as to those amounts, but that just clearly kind of an not to exceed limit, which I would think we would not come close to doing, but this just allows us to go ahead with the design phase of any projects and then reimburse ourselves once those funds come in.
Any questions from the board?
No, I just want to reiterate that this does not suggest that we've identified anything about these numbers. All this does is provide a pathway for us as we continue to discuss what projects might be and what dollar amounts might attach. We need to open this pathway so that we'll be able to move if and when we decide to do so.
So, Dr. Nesterbaker, just to tag onto that, I believe that the description in section 1 clarifies this. The school district intends that this resolution shall constitute an official intent for purposes of section 1.150-2E of Treasury regulations prescribed in the Internal Revenue Code of '86. So we have to, my understanding of the motion is we have to declare that official intent as a portion, or as through this motion, in order for us to be in alignment and in compliance with the Internal Revenue Code. Okay.
Any other questions or comments? Can you please call the roll?
Mr. Velardo?
Yes.
Mr. Byrd?
Yes.
Dr. Nesterbaker?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Ms. Cotter?
Yes. Okay, moving on to agenda items 8.01 through 8.09. Can I please have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, Ms. Lofton.
Good evening. Good evening, President Cotter, members of the board. Tonight's consent agenda contains 9 sections involving 162 persons. Section 8.01 is the resignation of 3 classified employees and 1 substitute. 8.02 is the resignation of 1 administrator and 1 teacher. 8.03 is a leave of absence for 1 classified employee and 1 amended end date. 8.04 is a leave of absence for 4 teachers. 8.05 is a temporary change of assignment for 3 classified employees. 8.06 is a contractual status change for 2 classified employees. 8.07 is the reemployment of 131 classified employees. 8.08 is the employment of 2 classified employees, 6 summer food service employees, and 5 summer food service substitutes. And 8.09 is the employment of 1 summer intervention teacher. Be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? No? Okay, thank you. Can you please call the roll?
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Dr. Nesterbaker?
Yes.
Mr. Byrd?
Yes.
Mr. Velardo?
Yes.
Ms. Cotter?
Yes. Okay, moving on in the agenda, item 9.01, revised policy 4121. Can I please have a motion and second?
So moved.
Second.
And is there anyone covering this policy?
President Cotter, I'm here if you have questions. I covered it last time, and
Okay.
this is the second reading, so just if there are questions.
Okay, are there any board questions? No? Okay, thanks. Can you please call the roll?
Dr. Nesterbaker?
Yes.
Mr. Byrd?
Yes.
Mr. Velardo?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Ms. Cotter?
Yes. Okay, moving on to item 9.02, was a resolution to proceed with the development of design options for renovation of Westerville South High School. I know we've talked about this a bit. Is there a staff person that's going to be talking about this further, or? No?
Motion
No?
second.
I know. Can I have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, is there anyone just going to talk about it, or no?
After discussion from the board meeting from 2 weeks ago, where we had the resolution from the floor, we felt it was necessary to bring it back for our second reading, make sure it was clear about where we're headed. So that's why it's presented for this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Kellogg. Are there any board questions?
I thought it was clear at the last board meeting, but doing it again this evening makes it absolutely ultra clear. And plus, Richard and I were the ones who moved and seconded it last time. Now I've got Tracy and Rick doing it this. There can be no doubt as to what we mean at this point in time.
That's funny. Okay, any other questions?
Amen.
All right, can you please call the roll?
Mr. Velardo?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Mr. Byrd?
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Yes.
Ms. Cotter?
Yes. Okay, moving on to new business. Item 10.01, Policy 4162. I see Mr. Dorn approaching.
Good evening, President Cotter, Vice President Davidson, members of the board, Dr. Kellogg, Mrs. Hendricks. Tonight you have a revision to Policy 4162, drug and alcohol testing of CDL license holders and other employees who perform safety-sensitive functions in front of you. The revision to the policy are twofold. First, recent changes in federal regulations has specified changes to which substances must be tested. In fact, it's opiates to opioids. And secondly, this policy revision now extends to the policy to other employees who perform safety-sensitive functions. Thus, we will now test the new van drivers who will be transporting our special education students, as well as other district employees who maintain or operate a board-owned vehicle. Other revisions in the policy now indicate that candidates shall also be tested for the presence of alcohol in their system prior to employment. Furthermore, if during any test the lab determines that an adulterant has been added to a specimen, then the test will be considered positive and the employee shall be prohibited from driving any school vehicle and be referred to the district's employee assistance program. Previously, the employee was just retested with an observed collection. On the financial side, the administrative cost to manage the pool of employees is about $230. There's a cost of $44 per drug and alcohol screening for all new employees, and 7% of the total pool of employees who are in the testing program. The total additional cost is not expected to exceed $1,000 annually. It is recommended that the board adopt the changes in policy 4162 as written.
Any questions or comments on this? Okay. Okay, moving on to item 10.02, Policy 5111, eligibility of resident, non-resident students.
Good evening, President Cotter, members of the board. I'm presenting revisions to Policy 5111, eligibility of resident, non-resident students for a first reading. District's legal counsel has reviewed and has reviewed the recommended revision to this policy. The recommended revision language is not a change from our current practice. We are attempting to make sure everyone knows how inclusive we are and how we operate. I'm happy to answer any questions.
I think you just answered my question. I couldn't figure out why we were making such a big deal about regardless of citizenship or immigration, because that's already the law. And we say that in the policy that we follow the law. So it just seemed redundant to me.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you. Moving on to Policy 5112, are you covering that as well?
Policy 5112, entrance requirements for a first reading. The policy revision references provisions in RC 3321.01B for enrollment to first grade. The revision also cites acceptable enrollment forms to document the age and birth date of a child. I'm also happy to answer any questions on this policy revision.
Any questions or comments from the board?
I have a comment. So I'm going to share my thoughts and concerns, I'm sure you know. Very supportive of an August 1st start date for kindergartners. Just since we're looking at this policy, I thought I'd throw it up there again. Not happy with the state standards for our kindergartners. I feel like it is not appropriate. I think we are seeing signs social emotionally as they move down the line. I would love to see us change that September 30th date to August 1st. And I did check, Gahanna, Big Walnut, New Albany, and Bexley actually do start August 1st. So just thoughts and concerns out there.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
I was wondering about the wording of item A, where it says her birth certificate or similar documentation, and then it moves down and says acceptable forms of documentation include. I felt that that was a bit confusing in the way it was worded. It seemed to me it would be more understandable, less confusing, to say something along the lines of a child's American or foreign birth certificate. Because when we say acceptable forms of documentation include foreign birth certificate, adoption record, and so forth, it suggests to a person reading and trying to follow along exactly as they're supposed to, where does my American birth certificate lie? So I would suggest that we kind of clean up that language on A so that it's a little clearer as regards what we're actually telling people.
Happy to do so.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to item 10.04, policy 8300, continuity of organizational operations plan.
This is new policy 8300. You've said it better than I am going to try to say it. I'll call it COOP for an abbreviation for a first reading. The COOP is a document to provide structure to restore the district's learning environment as quickly as possible following a crisis. The district's COOP is not a public document. I served on a district business advisory committee back in 2011 to develop an emergency relocation response that's currently on the books for us. I am happy to answer any questions.
So these types of plans are something that I deal with in my career. I'm a little puzzled by this one. The notion is to restore the critical operations and functions of the district. But, and I get that, but the overarching responsibility of the district is the education of students. So what's the interplay between critical operations and functions and restoring the classroom setting relative to this policy?
It sounds like you have a lot of in-depth experience in this, and I appreciate the question. I believe that the intent behind this required policy from an auditor's standpoint is to ready our district in the event that a tornado wipes out Westerville Central tomorrow. How do we go about figuring out how to recoup, regroup, figure out how do we devise an educational process, whether it be, split sessions, or how do we, as quickly as we humanly can, get back on our feet and start to do the business of education for students again. It provides a general framework. Anyone will probably tell you who has worked on developing these plans. It provides just the ability to have pre-thought some things so that you're not starting cold, but it would depend upon the actual totality of the situation that you're dealing with in order to actually put exact plans in place.
Okay. That helps. I appreciate it. It seems like one piece of an overall puzzle from a policy standpoint, but we can address it as we go through it administratively.
Any other questions? No? Okay, moving on to item 10.05, policy 8400, school safety.
Revisions to policy 8400, school safety. The revision reflects requirements in Ohio Administrative Code 3301-5-1. Our current plans reflect this standard. I am happy to answer any questions.
Not a question. I've got another itty-bitty editing suggestion. Under the 4 parts of the EMP, number 1, a single document to address all hazards. Can we say a single document to address all reasonably foreseeable hazards?
Reasonably foreseeable. Reasonably foreseeable.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, moving on to item 10.06, policy 9141, business advisory council.
I think this one's mine.
Okay, Dr. Kellogg.
So simply a revision and update to the current BAC policy.
offers some more structure, similar in language in terms of purpose. Also offered an option for school localities to, rather than do an in-house business advisory council, share with a regional approach to the ESC. We considered that option and decided against. We can still participate with the ESC's regional council, but we'll maintain our own. So just a way to have two-way communication with our local businesses regarding skill sets for students, career awareness. A lot of this work gets done currently through our career technical education program. Each one of our career technical education programs in-house has to have a curriculum advisory group as well that provides the same feedback. This will give a little more structure. It also has some reporting functions that didn't exist before, both in terms of reporting to the board and then online. So we will put this in place.
Are those currently operating advisory councils, are you saying that those are the Business Advisory Council? Are they subsumed into it? Do they continue to operate separately?
They will continue to operate separately from this more formalized structure. We're going to, working with Ann Baldwin on this one, our coordinator of college and career readiness, and we're considering what is the relationship between current systems we have in place to this group, this required group as well. So is it membership from those curriculum advisory groups that would then comprise this, or is it a two-way communication? That's some of the things we're going to work out.
The other question I have then is, on this paragraph, the council shall further provide recommendations to the board delineating employment skills and developing curriculum to instill these skills, et cetera. How do you envision this meshing with the contractual language around curriculum development in this district?
As I said, in our current career technical education programs, these advisory councils already do that function. So their recommendations to the board can then be used as part of what we use with Curriculum Council when we consider content, but the other piece is approaches to instruction, right? So there's content that can be part of this, and then there's approaches to instruction as well. And there may be program opportunities aside from a regular classroom, so job shadowing, mentoring, internships, those kinds of events that we can have within schools or as part of school programs that are outside the regular curriculum that can be developed, that are things that we've already discussed and are putting in place.
Yeah, I see that. I just worry about, that sentence just jumped out at me, because what I don't want to do is create a suggestion or an inference that we are attempting to subvert the contractual language around curriculum development.
No, that's
And
why.
I know we
yeah.
wouldn't.
These are recommendations, and I think there's a two-way approach to this that may not be implicit in the language, which is our opportunity to work with local businesses as well to talk about what we do within our classrooms and how we are working with children today. I think sometimes there's assumptions that there's gaps that may not be as pronounced as some people believe they are. And I think that would be helpful to understand. Also, opportunities for teachers as it relates to understanding those skill sets and how that can be played into instructional practices or content.
And I saw, I believe I saw in this that two-way street desire, and I really like that a lot. I would love for the Business Advisory Council to be a really robust entity. I think we have some great businesses and community organizations here, and would love to ratchet up our internship, our communications, and how it, so I am in favor of that. I like it a lot.
So how large are you envisioning this council to be?
Haven't thought that far ahead yet. So giving thought to, it talks about major industries kind of in your school district, so we'll look at that component. Don't have a number on it yet. Ann and I reviewed it. She's going to start building a framework that she and I can work for. I find if your number's too small,
when you're talking about business people who are busy in their regular lives, who may have to miss a meeting. If the number of people you have invited too small and you lose attendance because you have 3 or 4 meetings a year, that's a problem. If the number's too big, then you don't have opportunity for great voice. There's other ways for this group to be informed as well, in terms of data that's out there, information that's out there, that this group can collect that provides some of that information as well. So it doesn't have to be a 25-person committee that's trying to represent every industry out there. I think it can also be a group that is, and I've already got thoughts on where that is. There's some work already going on in our community around this issue of employability and what workforce development might look like for this. So there are already plug-in opportunities just waiting for us. So I think we can get the right people at the table, the right number of people, and the right information. First thing is going to be organizationally getting people committed who will do it, then using the time to set up the structure per the policy, and then get us off and running. I think it's a great opportunity, so I like keeping it in-house. We have great relations with the chamber and other business community members as well. This is a great opportunity.
Any other board questions or comments? I think it's a great opportunity for us to engage with local business partners and also create some more opportunity for our students, so I'm glad to see it. Thanks. Okay, moving on to item 10.07, revision of honors anatomy and physiology, chemistry, honors chemistry, physics, AP Physics 2, and AP Physics C mechanics. I see Ms. Knapp coming up. Thank you.
And for this, good evening and thank you. And for this agenda item, I have Lindsay Manzo, Jessica Bay, and Lauren Sefton. So thank you for sticking around and waiting for yours. When it came up on the board, I'm like, we're on the big board. We're on the big board. We're getting closer. So thank you. And this is really like 6 in 1. This is numerous courses of study that we're looking at, some of which include materials for purchase over the summer, and for our chemistry work and physics, we're taking a little bit of a different direction. So over the past several years, we've been working on revisions of our high school courses, particularly that in grades 11 and 12. We spent a number of years, I should say, on those courses from grades 6 to 10. They were new state standards. We were being assessed in those. We wanted to help, provide education to our teachers with those standards and those expectations. So that was really our focus. So some of these chemistry, for example, is quite dated, but we knew that we had this opportunity. So they include honors anatomy, which is actually new when it comes to Ohio's learning standards. In February of this year, they formally wrote a course of study for that from ODE before it had been our own work. This course includes or provides students with fundamental knowledge of human body systems, aligns again with the new state syllabus, and incorporates scientific practices. And oftentimes people or students who are looking at a career in health, medicine, pharmaceuticals, lab research, or biomedical engineering will take this course. It pairs nicely with our Project Lead the Way courses as well. And Keith Elasti, Julie Chance, and Janet Pritchard were the members who worked on honors anatomy and physiology. And several years ago, and I reminded when we went to high school curriculum council that it was just anatomy and physiology, and due to the level of coursework, they had asked that it become honors, but we didn't revise the course at that time. So a few people said, wait, I've seen this course recently, but that was the shift based on the teachers working with both courses like bio and honors bio. They asked that this be delineated, so that's a change. Moving along to chemistry and honors chemistry, they build on that physical science that students took in middle school. This might be the first physical science course that our students take in high school, because they have the opportunity as 9th graders to enroll directly into biology or honors biology. So in some cases, this counts as a student's physical science credit. In other cases, it could count as an advanced science credit if they've already met the physical science graduation requirement, because there are 3: physical, life, and advanced. So Chemistry is kind of a tricky one for us and our counselors because it could go either way, so we really have to look at those individually. Topics in both courses include matter, atomic structure, periodic trends, chemical bonding, chemical reactions, getting this all right, ladies, equilibrium, thermochemistry, gases and acids and bases. And what we also did, which was important, and we did this in mathematics and we did this back in our ELA courses, is that we aligned it to the ACT college benchmarks. So college readiness benchmarks, I should say. So if you look at the document online, it's super helpful because it says if to earn a 12 or 15, these are the competencies you should have. To earn a 16 to 18, these are the competencies. And with science, it's a 23. To be considered college and career readiness with mathematics, it's 22. And I'm talking about math later. And so we really looked at these to prepare our students to be college ready, to have met that benchmark. And then with our honors, we have stepped it up a notch. So I wanted, that as our students take the ACT, our curriculum is reflecting what that expectation is. Moving on to physics, and as a reminder, AP Physics 1 was approved in November, or probably December, but and that's a different for us. All the courses that we're talking about today were approved in November if they were a new course, but these are just revised. The high school course description guide hasn't changed, so we didn't feel the need to take these back in November. But Physics 1, AP Physics 1, was new. So this also builds on physical science that was learned in middle school. Topics include motion, forces, gravitation, momentum, electrical circuits, electrostatics, and waves. It's also aligned with AP Physics 1, so students can enter either course, but it's at different depths. So if I take physics, the second year I could go into AP Physics 2 or AP Physics C. If I enroll in AP Physics 1, I could take AP Physics 2 or AP Physics C. It's really not a limiter, just another option for students.
And that wouldn't be too much of an exponential jump from AP Physics to 2, that you feel like that wouldn't be too much of a jump for the students?
No, the idea is that it's the same topic, so they would at least have exposure to it. They may not have gone as deep.
Gotcha. Okay.
But they would have had the same exposure.
Gotcha.
We've had students that have done the same thing where they've taken chemistry and realized, oh my gosh, I love this, I want to keep going. Never knew that they had that passion, and then they were able to move into AP chemistry.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Thank you. Great example. Previously, when AP courses or AP Physics courses were adopted, it was just AP Physics very generally, and we wanted to define the two that we offer, and so we now have listed in our course description book AP Physics 2 and AP Physics C. AP Physics C Mechanics, both are second-year physics courses and have new courses to reflect the updates from the College Board. AP Physics 2, the big difference is that it's algebra-based, and APC Mechanics is calculus-based. For AP Physics 2, it would be the equivalent of a second semester course as an introductory college course. And then AP Physics C would be considered equivalent to a college physics course for majors. So it's a little bit more refined and a little bit more focused. And the whole calculus algebra difference. And David Johnston and Mark Schmidley were part of that committee, and Lindsay Manzo has led all of that work. Fiscal impact, so that's a general overview of the changes to the courses of study. Fiscal impact, we are asking for resources to support honors anatomy and physiology. They have picked a book, Fundamentals of Anatomy and Physiology, shocking title, and it's approximately $125 per student, and that will be based on enrollment. AP Physics 2 is another resource that is needed, and it also includes Mastering Physics, which is an online component. And for almost all of our AP courses, we have the Mastering component that's online. Our teachers have found this very valuable. So we have Mastering Biology as an example, and they have really come to like that support. And that's approximately, and remember, these are You can get college credit if if you earn a certain score, or not have to take certain college courses. So the price is $220 per book, very reflective of a college course. And with AP training, the district supports sending teachers to a week-long training over the summer to best prepare them to teach the course, and that's approximately $1,500 to $2,000 per teacher to send. Now, we do have some teachers who have already gone through this training, so we don't need to send one from every building at this time. Interesting with chemistry, honors chemistry and physics, in lieu of textbooks, a collection of research-based, rigorously vetted, open-source instructional materials organized by unit will be compiled by the Westerville Chemistry, Honors Chemistry, and Physics teachers. This will include, but not limited to, demonstrations, inquiry-based lab investigations, simulations, animations, video, problem sets, formative and summative assessments, and safety protocols. So we're going to be building these as teachers in Schoology over the course of the next year and ongoing. If some of you might recall, and I've spoken about her before, but Beth Eddy at South did this work years ago with OBC, Ohio Blended Collaborative, with honors chemistry. And so I think she would be a great resource and a starting point. But it really helps us to individualize and personalize instruction. And it helps the teachers be quick to use the resources that are best for them. Again, it's open source. It has been rigorously vetted. And we really feel that this is a step in the right direction. I remember attending one of their meetings, and some of the survey results, just the book was underwhelming, and it's outdated so quickly, and it's a hands-on class. And they felt that this would be the best way to deliver the content to the students and have them experience it. So there's not truly a fiscal impact for those 3 courses at this time. And it's something that we want to grow over the course of the next year. So I'd love to come back this time next year and tell you how it's going.
And I personally am very excited about that piece. I attended an event at Point View. Dr. Kellogg, what was that called?
Tomorrow's Learning Today.
Tomorrow's Learning Today. And she was there and went through some of the curriculum, and had some students there, and she tried to describe it, but the students kept cutting her off and telling me how excited they were about this.
That's terrific.
So that was a huge reminder to me that the students were just really engaged at that level. And so I'm very excited about bringing more of that technology piece in, especially into these kinds of courses. I mean, I love these courses. I don't understand anything in these courses, but I love these courses. And the way we're trying to do this, I'm so excited for you 3 and the others that'll be a part of this.
Other questions or comments around
Any other
science?
questions or comments? Okay, thank you. Are you staying with us for 10.08?
Staying, but I think you guys.
Thank you for
go.
being here.
Yes.
and
Thank you for staying.
Yes, thank you
I feel
for
like we
staying.
should cook up a whole bunch of questions to make it worth
Someone
your
might
while
have
to
2
stay.
children turning 8 today. I know. I made the same face. I'm like, what are you doing here?
Awesome.
Okay, so item 10.08, recommended purchase of Framing Your Thoughts instructional materials.
I have 2 other friends joining me.
Okay.
2 other colleagues. They're friends. We spend a lot of time together. So these next 2 really excite me. And high school science excites me too, John. But last year, as you might recall, we brought forth courses of study in secondary ESL and resources to support that. And it's exciting that we are bringing forward 2 resources, this item and the next one, that specifically support our students who have been identified with disabilities. So I have Kirsten Drummond, I always screw that up, Kirsten Drummond, because I try to read it, and Lee Hoskins, and they have been instrumental from the special education department, as well as Ms. Gertie Glass and Lindy Whiston in the back. So you guys can come up too if you want, or you could stay back there. Oh, I'm getting the look of she's staying back there. Okay. So, Framing Your Thoughts is a multi-sensory writing curriculum that spans from grades K to 12. So both of these are K-12 resources, and they're used a little bit differently throughout the bands. It's paced and organized by units, and they have a lovely display in the back too, to portray specific writing skill sets and abilities. Within each instructional unit are strategies and lessons that support student development and independence. While its core purpose is Tier 3 instruction, it has been used in Tier 1 and Tier 2 as well. So as we adopt this, this would be adopted for special education students specifically, as teachers co-teach or work in small groups, or some of our gen ed teachers have taken professional development from them and say, oh, you know what, that's a really good sentence starter. I think I want to use that with my kids. That's certainly up to them, but it's purchased for the special education teachers to have that resource, to help them differentiate. But a lot of our teachers have picked up some great tips and strategies along the way. So it's a program that can be utilized across instructional settings and complements our ELA standards. It's divided into two major components. One portion of the program focuses on sentence structure, and one is on paragraph development. And it addresses spelling, writing, listening, comprehension, and language. The lesson formats include skill sets and assess the students throughout the instruction until the student demonstrates mastery. And it also provides instructors with a reliable and measurable template to support and guide students through their development as struggling writers toward independence. And again, what began as a specific intervention for spec ed students has blossomed into a teaching partnership with gen ed teachers as well. It's provided guidance and structure on how to teach, model, and differentiate writing tasks, not only for students with disabilities, but all students, and I think that that's really powerful. Elementary has used Framing Their Thoughts to assist with tackling those beginner skills that relate to writing both simple and complex statements. Students were able to learn very quickly the visuals paired with specific writing traits and apply them to their writing. And these applications have been used in both small group and whole group instruction across the grades. And I think that's what's great about both of these products is we've had examples of whole group, small group, and then one-on-one instruction, which is extremely powerful. Secondary instruction has also greatly benefited from the structure and predictability of the program by breaking down the writing process into manageable pieces for our kids. It ultimately leads to grade-level multi-paragraph writing products, and many students have encountered success and an increase in confidence when asked to complete the writing process. The fiscal impact, this is approximately $600 per teacher. It would be purchased for 80 teachers, and I will say this is something that we have been piloting maybe kind of past year and a half-ish, as we've, almost 2 years now. It's the end of school year, isn't it? To really have our teachers test this product out and see how it works. And it was discovered through the research of the two of you, and I believe Gertie Glass as well, of, okay, what's out there and what's working? And so a lot of research was done to find these specific products. And so the total cost is approximately $46,000 for this resource K-12. Questions or comments? And I'm going to turn it over to these two. Okay.
Is it modeled after the Barton system? Because it kind of looks like that.
I don't think so.
Okay.
In regards to, since it's focused generally on the writing portion. So I'm not familiar with Susan Barton program in regards to the writing.
Okay. It looks a lot like it, which is great, so. A little bit, not enough to speak intelligently about it. But no, this looks like a great piece of curriculum for the kids, for a lot of kids. So.
Can't say anything about the Barton system, but I can say it was really exciting to see the teachers' reaction to this. The connection to it, the energy around it, the desire to keep it in play and to actually expand the use of it was great to hear about, great to see both this piece and the next piece as well. So I'm very excited about it, and primarily because of the great results that the teachers have been piloting it, believe we're seeing because of it.
So we already have teachers using it now. What grades? Just curious.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay. Great, so we're touching a lot of kids. Very nice. Thank you very much.
Any other questions or comments from the board? No? Okay. Moving on to 10.09, recommended purchase of Spire instructional materials.
Yes, and SPIRE is a research-based multisensory instructional program that integrates Orton-Gillingham methods to provide intensive and specific instruction to students identified with disabilities. And it's really specific around the areas of encoding and decoding. The entire program contains several features that are common in an Orton-Gillingham program, which are systemic and explicit instruction, a sequential scope and sequence, multisensory techniques, phonics-based instruction, and emotionally sound pedagogy. It's diverse, flexible, and is able to be differentiated. The instructional format for SPIRE is applicable, as I think I mentioned this before, to one-on-one instruction, small group, and whole group. And the arrangement of the materials is available to support and supplement the instructional model, permit introduction, reteaching, and mastery of the lessons. Elementary grades have fully embraced this model during our piloting of the materials to provide instructions in small group within the gen ed setting. Secondary grades have utilized this model in instructional guidelines and materials. It's occurred in whole class, small group, and one-on-one settings. And I want to say we've had quite a few conversations over the course of the year where we felt we wanted to be really clear as what the expectations were for our secondary folks specifically. You know, when in elementary, sometimes there's a little more of that flexibility with the time. But when, you know, it's the IS and is this something that's going to happen in supplemental, or am I supposed to push into the ELA classroom and have this happen? So we've really had a lot of conversations, and our special education department and our building administrators have worked through how best to serve our kids who have this need to get the specific instruction. Because even if I'm on a reading IEP and you two are on a reading IEP, I might need decoding, but you don't. So for them to have SPIRE, that wouldn't be appropriate. That's only appropriate for me. So I think, and you two have led it, and Lindy as well, some really great dialogue with our, specifically our middle school principals. I think that might have been where the greatest concern has come from, but I commend them on taking the steps necessary to really find how this can work and how we can support our students and teachers in the implementation of this. So it's been some really healthy conversation. Good stuff.
I mentioned how excited people were about both of these. What I was surprised by was the great need for materials in spec ed. We are really, truly undersourced, and we need to improve and increase the resources in special education, and these two components move us along that path. It was disheartening to me to truly understand how much we need, and heartening to understand how much they'd done without the resources that they should have, and exciting to understand how much they were seeing as regards results from these two implementations in a pilot basis.
Questions or comments over SPIRE?
Any other questions or comments? No? Okay, moving on to item 10.10, recommended purchase of materials for statistics, trigonometry, and functions.
Okay, so this is, thank you very much.
Yes, thank you for staying especially.
So in the fall, the board adopted the course Statistics, Trigonometry, and Functions, and they named that, as you recall, because the largest component is statistics. Over the past several months, the teachers reviewed a resource, and their recommendation is the book Functions, Statistics, and Trigonometry. So that's not going to be confusing. What class are you going to? What is the book? And okay, it's right. I'm like, really? But the course is aligned to Ohio's fourth-year learning standards, as well as the ACT benchmarks that I had referenced earlier. It will primarily serve seniors who have successfully completed the Algebra 2 Essentials. We're in the first year of that Algebra 2 Essentials course. And the reason they chose it is they felt that it had the best balance of statistical reasoning and trigonometry. Every other resource that they looked at was either too heavy in statistics and just a little bit of trig, or it was all trig and not enough statistics. So they really felt that this resource provided that balance that the others did not. And I don't have the breakdown per book on here, but the total estimated cost is $15,000. It was, I remember it was 11,600 books, or $600 for 120 students. So if you want to divide that, that would be the book cost. And it's approximately $1,600, excuse me, for the teacher resource, and that would be per teacher. And right now, it looks like we're going to be offering this at 2 of our 3 buildings for next year, based on enrollment. So the course of study was approved back in the fall so that students could register for it. Then we came with the resources. Teachers evaluated what they wanted best.
Any questions or comments? No? Okay, well, thank you so much for your presentation tonight.
Okay, thank you very much.
Moving on in the agenda, item 10.11, middle school attendance boundaries. See Mr. Dorn is approaching, along with Mr. Reeves.
Good evening again. Tonight we have a first reading for a recommendation to make adjustments to our middle school attendance boundaries. The recommendation to adjust middle school boundaries is limited to 2 specific areas that are currently zoned for Heritage Middle School. That would be rezoned, 1 to Genoa Middle School and 1 to Blendon Middle School. The students in these 2 areas are also zoned for Amherst Elementary School, just for reference. The executive leadership team is making this recommendation to the board to be effective for the 2018-2019 school year. Over the past 5 years, the student count at Heritage Middle School has been increasing each year from 892 students in 2014 to 1,030 students as of this month. There is an expectation that the student count will continue to rise at Heritage Middle School with some additional residential growth within its existing boundaries. Currently, the school has exceeded its building capacity measure, set at 925 students, by more than 10%. Contrarily, the student count at Genoa Middle School has been on decline over the same time period, from 951 students in 2013 to 873 as of this month. Genoa Middle School is well under their building capacity measure of 950 students. When you consider the number of current 5th through 7th grade students who are slated to attend Genoa Middle School next year, their student count is expected to be 818 students. Blendon Middle School's student count has been very consistent over this time period, and the current number of 5th through 7th graders in the district slated to attend Blendon next year are 702, whereas the building capacity measure is 725 students. The specific areas recommended for change are as follows. First, it is recommended that the board reassign the area commonly known as the Brookville Apartments as a Genoa Middle School attendance zone. For reference purposes, this area is bounded on the south side by Schrock Road, the west by I-71, the north by I-270, and the east by Garden Terrace Road and Spring Hill Lane. This change would move about 78 students from Heritage Middle School to Genoa Middle School. This area is the single Heritage attendance zone that is zoned for Central High School. The adjacent neighborhood to the east is also zoned for Genoa Middle School and Central High School. Second, it is recommended that the board reassign the area commonly known as Charing Cross as a Blendon Middle School attendance zone. This area is comprised of the group of residences in the vicinity of the intersection of Schrock Road and Westerville Road. This change would move 35 students from Heritage Middle School to Blendon Middle School. Mr. Reeves has some more information for you.
Mr. Reeves?
Good evening. As I shared with all of you in the board update, one of the considerations of staying with the current attendance zone versus making adjustments for Heritage is we would need to make some staffing adjustments for balance if we maintain the same attendance zone as some of our middle schools, specifically Genoa, is decreasing and Heritage is increasing. We want to make sure that we have equitable staff and opportunities for our students at Heritage. So with the change, the goal will be to minimally adjust FTE. We think that for the most part, Heritage losing 125 students would be right about where they should be with the staffing that they have. We believe that for the most part, Genoa and Blendon both could absorb the additional students with the staffing that they have. And I said for the most part, because one of the recommendations that we are looking at is for students that have been at Heritage for 2 years, the incoming 8th graders, to give them the opportunity to select to stay at Heritage for their 8th grade year. Not knowing the number of students at this point, if the board chooses to go this route, that could have some staffing implications as well if the majority, and let's say very neatly a third, if a third of those students are 8th graders and opt to stay for 1 year, then there still may need to be minimal staffing adjustments to make sure that Heritage has the resources they need. And I impress upon you, as we did in our meeting last week and I shared in the board updates, that given the time of year, the 3 middle schools that are impacted, and that's Blendon, Heritage, and Genoa, are really hampered to be able to move forward in making their master schedule. Students have registered and they have submitted requests because they need to know how many teachers they're going to have, which will let them know how many sections they're going to have. And so one of the things that we will be doing this week, and I've already started to play with, is starting to look at the variances of numbers compared with the staffing at each of the 3 buildings to say if all of the students go, starting with the premise of if we moved no staff, what would the class sizes be? What are the resources that are available? Would Heritage and Genoa and Blendon have equitable opportunity for reading labs and math labs and success coaches and those things that they've developed? And if a third of the students stayed back in 8th grade at Heritage, well, what would that then mean? Because Heritage wouldn't come down as far and Genoa wouldn't come up as far and Blendon may not come up as far. And do we need to make in the short term some staffing adjustments so that Heritage has the opportunities to provide those same resources to their students? So we're going to play with those numbers. And then this being a first reading and for questions and discussion, and 2 weeks later, the board will make the ultimate decision. Are they going to go that route? Are we going to go that route as a district next year or not? And if we do, then obviously we want to make sure that we give the uprising 8th graders the opportunity and their families to make an informed decision. But understand we are under a time crunch. One of the things that we are going to do, a communication piece, Greg Vibrant's put together great communication. We are going to send out first thing in the morning an email to all 4 staff middle schools so that Walnut Springs, by the way, is not impacted. Either way, their staff is not impacted, their student enrollment. But they'll hear it and they should know what's going on with their sister schools. We'll send customized emails to the staff at Genoa, the staff at Blendon, and the staff at Heritage to let them know what the board is considering and the potential impact for those buildings. We'll also send an all call out to the families who are impacted that live in those areas so that the families can be notified and be aware and provide any feedback that they want to make and be able to make plans for their families. And so that's where we are at this point. One other note that we added in, as a district of a multi-school, whether it's multi-high school or multi-middle school, when the board chooses to change boundaries, which causes students to change schools, that does not have an impact on any kind of OHSAA eligibility for students who participated at Heritage in the 7th grade and may want to go to Genoa and participate. It has no impact on them.
Any board questions or comments?
Remind me again, I think, Scott, you mentioned some numbers, but the Amherst Heritage Central piece, which would be Amherst, Genoa, Central, what approximately, how many students are in that cluster?
78.
Okay. And how many are in the other cluster, which would be Heritage, but now Blendon?
35.
And the first one that you mentioned, those students, those shifting middle school, would still attend Central, which is where they are slated to attend now?
They are slated to attend Central. That would not change.
Okay.
In fact, they're the only, out of the 1,033 students at Heritage, they're the only 78 that would go to Central. So it would actually put them together with a larger peer group that they would translate into, matriculate into the next level.
It's a little bit of a, I don't want to call it a cleaning up, but it's a little bit of a, that's where they would go anyway. There's that's a logical
Correct.
step. Logic being something that sometimes we don't always understand from the heart. I get that. And then the other one, they are slated for South, and if they're shifted from, if they're provided the opportunity from Heritage to Blendon, they would still be southbound.
Correct.
Okay. 78 the first one, 35 the second one.
Based on our current enrollment. rate.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And when would the communication go out if we kind of move this ball forward from Mr. Vibrant's?
We are sending a communication out, obviously with a public board meeting and this being discussed. We're giving them more specific information tomorrow morning.
Okay. Them meaning the
Being
staffs and the community?
And the community, yes.
Okay.
The impacted community.
Okay. And so we are freely saying to the community, give us feedback.
Yes.
Yep. Thank you. I think that's, I do want to get those numbers straight. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions?
Yeah, I really appreciate one comment and then one question. I very much appreciate the information that you both sent in the board updates. Very, very helpful. Answered most of my questions through that information. One thing that I was wondering, you mentioned, Scott, that you were talking about the seventh graders who have participated in sports, cheerleading, et cetera, and that made me think about the transition for this group of students to their new middle schools, assuming the board chooses to go in that direction. And I'm wondering if you've been working with the principals on how to make that transition as easy as possible for students who have been involved in activities at their current school, how we make those opportunities as easy as possible and plug them into those same activities in their new school, so that they know that they're not losing by going to this new school. Are we working with the principals on those pieces?
Yes, like I said, we're going to meet this week and start playing with numbers, but one of the things that we are capable of doing is we are capable of knowing exactly who those students are.
Right.
So we can do personal outreach, and it should probably come from the principal, whether it's in a mailer of a handwritten note, welcome, excited to have you, looking forward, things like that. There are things that they can do to personally outreach with kids. The current sixth graders and upcoming fifth graders would not have participated in extracurriculars, but certainly we want to make sure that they're aware of all the things at Genoa or Blendon, if the board chooses to go that way, that are available to them that they can become involved in. So.
Thank you for that. I think that's an important component, and I like the work that you have done on this. I think it's very thorough. It makes good sense to me. It makes sense for the building heritage. It also makes sense for those neighborhoods. It makes sense for their high school careers. It makes sense for where they are now and their needs as middle school students. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, I'd just like to thank you too. I think it's really makes a lot of sense. It's very logical. So thank you. Okay, moving on to item 11.01, donations. Can I have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Any comments? Can you please call the roll?
Dr. Nestor Baker.
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson.
Yes.
Mr. Byrd.
Yes.
Mr. Velardo.
Yes.
Ms. Cotter.
Yes. Of course, we're always very thankful for all our donations. And then item number 11.02, amendment to cell phone tower lease agreement. Mr. Dorn, can I have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Tonight, you have a first amendment to a lease agreement in front of you for your approval. In December of 1997, we entered into a lease agreement with Cincinnati SMSA Limited Partnership, care of Ameritech Cellular, that became effective on February 1st, 1998. The initial length of the lease was for 5 years with 4 additional 5-year extensions. The lease agreement terminates on January 31st, 2023. American Tower now handles all day-to-day site operations for this tower and the lease. Since the agreement began, the district has earned, this lease has earned the district just under $200,000 in 20 years, or just under $10,000 a year. We are currently in the beginning of the last 5-year term with an annual rent of $10,524. American Tower would like to extend the lease for 30 additional years beyond this 5-year term that expires in 2023. We have come to an agreement with American Tower on the language in the lease extension terms. The terms include accepting the 30-year extension. However, we negotiated a change with our current base from $10,524 to $18,000 annually, and then maintaining the 15% term increase from the original lease over the additional 30 years. This modification represents an increase in revenue of $996,000. The total value of the original lease and the extension will now exceed $1 million. It is recommended that you accept the terms of the agreement and execute the lease.
Is that the best you could do?
What if we really wanted to keep the tower?
Sorry?
I mean, we could do something with it, right?
Sure, sure.
Yeah. No. Thank you, appreciate the report.
Okay, any other questions or comments? No, thank you. Can you please call the roll?
Mr. Velardo,
Yes.
Mr. Byrd,
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker,
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson,
Yes.
Ms. Cotter.
Yes. Okay, moving on in the agenda to item number 11.03, resolution to authorize membership in the 2018-2019 Ohio High School Athletic Association. Mr. Reeves?
Yes,
Oh, wait,
thank-
I'm sorry, a motion and a second, sorry.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Reeves?
Yes, this is an annual resolution that we provide Ohio High School to ensure and reaffirm that we intend for our 3 high schools and 4 middle schools to be member schools. What that allows for our high schools is it allows them obviously to participate in postseason tournaments and state tournaments for the Ohio High School Athletic Association. It also allows our schools to be covered under Ohio High School's catastrophic insurance. If in the rare and hopefully never instance that a young person through sports participation has a catastrophic injury, they are covered. And we are one of the few state associations in the entire country where membership to the state association is free.
Any questions or comments? Okay, thank you. Can you please call the roll?
Mr. Velardo,
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson,
Yes.
Mr. Byrd,
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker,
Yes.
Ms. Cotter.
Yes. Okay, moving on in the agenda to item 12.01 for public comment. We do have a speaker this evening. Just a reminder that you'll have 5 minutes to address the board during the public comment section. Please address your comments to the board and not to the audience. A timer will be shown on the screens, and Mr. Hershiser will call time when 5 minutes has elapsed. Our first speaker is Ms. Peg Duffy.
Earlier in the evening, something was said about the sign. City Council has the public hearing scheduled for the 15th on that. And interesting, if you go to their website, you can see all the places where signs could possibly be. You're scheduled for executive sessions, which I assume relate to the search for the treasurer. I'm wondering why the names have not been published. A week ago today, through a records request, I read all 17 of those. Please explain the process that you will use to be in compliance with the requirements of the Sunshine Law and to keep Mr. Yost happy. You've asked for what's going on in Central Ohio in construction, but you haven't gone much out of your comfort zone. And I beg you to expand your horizon. Certainly would support everything that John Walden said tonight. And what you do from here on in, please remember the discussion, the transparency, following the process is going to be so important when it comes ballot issue time. Because as you've often said, 1/3 of the people always vote yes, 1/3 of the people say, over my dead body will I ever vote yes, and the decision is made by the undecideds. And the undecideds are watching, and if they aren't seeing enough, compare and contrast, pros and cons, and that sort of thing, they're probably going to go to the no side. So bear that in mind as you're moving forward.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Let's see. Long agenda. Moving on to board comments, item 13.01. Does anyone have any comments this evening?
Couple of pages I'd like to share. Anybody that's here, I would appreciate you going back to the displays that were put back there. I think that'd be interesting for y'all to look at. They took the time to put it up, so I would encourage you to look at. Congratulations, award winners this evening.
Any other comments?
Look at all those people running over there now. Be careful, Jen. Watch. You're going to get trampled.
Okay, I have one comment. I just wanted to let people know that the Westerville Education Foundation is sponsoring a fundraiser on May 5th called An Artful Affair. So if you're interested in the arts and or helping to promote arts and other very creative projects in the district, the Westerville Education Foundation funds teacher grants so that they can provide additional creative projects and content for students. So please consider that event. Any other board comments? No? Okay, then moving on to agenda item 14.01, the board will meet in executive session on Wednesday, April 25th and Thursday, April 26th at 6 p.m. here at the Early Learning Center to continue with our treasurer search. The board will also meet in regular session on Monday, May 7th at 6 p.m. here at the Early Learning Center. So at this time, I'd like to consider a motion and a second
So
for adjournment.
moved.
Second. Richard can have it. That's fine.
Okay, can you please call the roll?
Mr. Velardo,
Absolutely.
Mr. Byrd,
Yes.
Dr. Nesterbaker,
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson,
Yes.
Ms. Cotter.
Yes, we are adjourned. Thank you so much for attending tonight.